Marcus Ellison walked into class expecting another ordinary day, until his teacher rolled out a busted engine and sneered, "Bet you can't fix this, boy." Laughter echoed off the walls, every eye waiting for him to fail. But Marcus only stepped forward, hands steady, gaze locked. 5 seconds, he said, and the room froze, wondering what they were about to witness. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Ellison had a way of disappearing in plain sight. He was the kind of student who sat in the back of the classroom, not because he had nothing to say but because he preferred the quiet hum of observation over the noise of being noticed. 16 years old, tall for his age but with the lean build of someone still growing into his frame, Marcus carried himself with an unspoken caution. In Detroit's West Side, caution was more than a personality trait, it was a survival skill. When the rest of the neighborhood kids spent their afternoons scrolling through TikTok or shooting hoops in the park, Marcus was usually in his garage. The garage smelled of oil and rust, and under the dim swing-arm lamp, he worked with his hands in a silence so focused that time often slipped away. His late father had left him more than memories. He'd left a battered red toolbox, every piece inside worn smooth from years of use. That toolbox was Marcus's inheritance, and his escape. He could fix lawnmowers, replace brake pads, and even rewire a faulty alternator. What he couldn't fix was how the world saw him. That morning at Jefferson High School had started like any other. The hallways were alive with the sharp slap of sneakers against linoleum, and the buzz of teenagers swapping stories between lockers. But the auto tech room, tucked away at the far end of the vocational wing, had its own atmosphere. The scent of grease clung to the air like a permanent fog, and the metallic clang of tools against workbenches echoed under the dim fluorescent lights. Mr. Walter Reeves stood at the front of the room, leaning against the teacher's desk, as if it were a podium. He was in his late 50s, heavy-set, with thinning gray hair that refused to stay combed. Years of sarcasm had carved deep lines into his face, and his smile, when it appeared, never seemed to reach his eyes. Reeves had a reputation, and not the good kind. His brand of teaching often crossed into belittlement, especially when it came to students he had already decided weren't worth much. Marcus was the only black student in that class. It wasn't something Reeves ever said out loud, but Marcus could feel it in the subtle pauses, the raised eyebrows when he spoke, and the way Reeves's tone shifted from dismissive to outright challenging whenever Marcus offered an answer. "All right, people," Reeves called, clapping his hands once, the sound cutting through the chatter. "Got a treat for you today." At the back of the room, Marcus kept his head down, tightening a bolt on the brake assembly he'd been working on. He wasn't in the mood to be part of whatever treat Reeves had in store. The screech of a rolling cart broke through the room. Every student turned as Reeves wheeled in a massive, rust-caked V8 engine. It looked ancient, the kind of thing you might dig out of a junkyard after 30 years buried under weeds. One of the valve covers was dented in, and a film of oil residue coated everything like a second skin. "Behold," Reeves announced with a flourish that bordered on theatrical, "the corpse of an American classic. This here, ladies and gentlemen, is a lesson in limits." A ripple of low laughter moved through the class. Marcus straightened slightly, his eyes narrowing as he studied the engine. Under all that grime, it still had bones, and bones could be rebuilt. "This beauty," Reeves continued, "is beyond repair. Seized pistons, cracked block, the works. I dragged it out from behind my cousin's shop, because it's the perfect example of what happens when you push something past its breaking point." Marcus caught the choice of words. Past its breaking point. Funny how often Reeves used that phrase when talking about people too. Reeves paced around the engine like a showman, drawing the students closer. "Now you all know the rule in here. We get our hands dirty, we learn something, but we don't waste our time on lost causes." He leaned over the engine, tapping it with the handle of a screwdriver. "And this is a lost cause." A girl near the front raised her hand. "So what are we supposed to do with it?" Reeves's grin turned sly. "Nothing. That's the point. You'll all get to examine it. Maybe strip it for parts. But fixing it? Not gonna happen." He let the statement hang for a moment before his gaze slid across the room and landed squarely on Marcus. There it was, that shift in tone, the way his voice sharpened just enough to sting. "Unless," Reeves said slowly, "Ellison here thinks he can work some kind of miracle." A murmur rose among the students, heads turning toward Marcus like they'd just been given a reason to expect entertainment. Marcus looked up from his work, meeting Reeves's eyes without blinking. "Why me?"
Reeves shrugged. You've got, what do you call it? Confidence.
Always tinkering in that garage of yours, thinking you're the next Henry Ford. Tell you what, he stepped aside, motioning toward the engine. I'll bet you can't even get this to crank in a week. The smirk that followed wasn't just about the bet. It was about putting Marcus in his place, and everyone in the room could feel it. A couple of boys in the back snickered, whispering under their breath. Marcus stood slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. His mind wasn't on Reeves's words anymore. It was on the sound of his father's voice, years earlier, in that same dimly lit garage. Engines are like people, son. They all have hearts. You just gotta know where to look. He walked toward the engine, ignoring the snide comments floating around him. Up close, he could see more than rust and grime. He could see potential. There was a looseness in the distributor cap. The fuel line didn't sit right, little details Reeves clearly hadn't noticed, or hadn't cared to. You're serious? One of the girls asked from the side. Marcus didn't answer her. Instead, he placed both hands on the cold metal of the engine block. The room seemed to quiet, the distant hum of the ventilation system filling the space between breaths. He wasn't just thinking about the challenge. He was thinking about all the other challenges no one had believed he could handle. The teachers who assumed he was trouble before he even spoke. The cops who slowed their cruisers when he walked home late. The store clerks who hovered near him in aisles. This wasn't just about an engine. Reeves leaned on the desk again, crossing his arms. So, you gonna admit it's hopeless, or you gonna embarrass yourself? Marcus's gaze didn't waver. 5 seconds, he said. The words weren't loud, but they cut through the air like the snap of a cable under tension. A few students laughed outright. 5 seconds to what? One boy jeered. To get it running, Marcus replied, his tone flat as if stating a fact instead of making a boast. Reeves chuckled. A deep, patronizing sound. 5 seconds. All right, Ellison, you've got the whole week if you want it. But if you're telling me you can start this pile in 5 seconds, well, I'll eat my own hat. Marcus's eyes didn't leave the engine. Hope it's clean. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the whispers started again, bouncing off the cinder block walls. Some were mocking, others incredulous. But Marcus barely heard them. His focus had narrowed to the machine in front of him, and the unshakable certainty that, whatever Reeves thought this was going to prove, he was about to prove something entirely different. He reached into his backpack, the faint jingle of metal tools breaking the uneasy silence. A single wrench caught the light. As he pulled it free, his fingers curling around it like it belonged there. And without another word, Marcus crouched beside the engine, ready to make good on a promise no one in that room believed he could keep. The wrench clicked into place, Marcus's hand tightened, and every eye locked on him as he whispered under his breath, "Let's see who's really impossible." The wrench clicked once, a small sound that somehow drew every gaze. The laughter came next, loud, relieved, like the class needed it to prove the world still made sense. 5 seconds? Ridiculous. It broke out in pockets. A snort near the drill press, a pair of chuckles by the parts cabinet, a full-throated cackle from the back row where the boys with spotless hands sat like critics. Their noise bounced off cinder block walls and fluorescent fixtures until it was the room's heartbeat. Marcus didn't flinch. He stood, close enough to the engine to smell old fuel, and hot dust baked into its metal. Noise was a thing that came and went. The machine in front of him had a different rhythm, and that was the one he tuned to. He watched the V8 the way a lifeguard watches waves. Not for what everyone else sees, but for the hidden pull underneath. 5 seconds, someone mimicked. He's for real. He's bluffing. Another voice cut in, low and satisfied. Figures. Mr. Reeves didn't laugh. He smiled, a thin, practiced line that looked like it had been sharpened. Clock's not ticking yet, Ellison, he said, but we'll all enjoy the show. The engine looked like history that refused to die. Edges chewed by time, gaskets seamed with oil, the block scarred. The placard wired to its stand read, "Donated. Incomplete training. Use only." Reeves had called it a corpse. Marcus saw it breathe in slow, mechanical memory. He put the wrench down and ran his fingertips along the intake manifold. Then the valve cover. Then the distributor body. His touch was gentle, but his attention was surgical. A blur of memory slid forward. Not invited but inevitable. A midnight garage that smelled like winter, and gasoline. His father's hands steady despite the cold. The old swing arm lamp threw a warm oval of light. "You listen with your eyes first," his father said, rapping the side of a carburetor. "Then with your fingers, Then when you're sure you're listening, you try your ears. Marcus, 12 then, had nodded like he understood. At 16 the words had settled into him like ballast. He circled to the left bank, eyes narrowing. The distributor cap sat a hair proud. Subtle, but proud. The vacuum line to the brake booster looked wrong. Not kinked, but rotated and pinned in a way that suggested someone had turned it to be almost right. The fuel line wore a newer clamp than the rest of the assembly. A collage of almost. Marcus felt the first tug of certainty. "Man, can we get on with it?" a boy muttered. "Some of us got a life. You'll be late to not changing oil." Another returned, earning a ripple of smirks. Reeves cut the noise with a raised hand. "If you're going to attempt the miracle, Ellison, do it before lunch. I got a hat to eat, apparently." Marcus didn't answer. He reached for his backpack, unzipped it, and fished out a stubby screwdriver with a chipped red handle. It was old, the kind of tool that had seen more than one story. He cupped it in his palm like a secret. He leaned in and loosened the distributor cap just enough to tilt it. Inside, the rotor was misaligned by a whisper. Not dramatic, but enough to chase timing off the rhythm. He rotated it back with 2 fingers, then tightened the cap again. 1, 2, 3, feeling the screws seat home in the familiar way of metal finally agreeing with itself. No one noticed, or if they did, they didn't understand what they'd seen. A whisper drifted from behind him. "He's just making it look complicated. Dude probably Googled something." Another said, "Bet he can't spell distributor." The sting in the air wasn't loud. It traveled under sentences, in the choice of words people thought didn't count. Marcus knew better than to carry their voices inside him. Still, they pressed along the edges of his concentration like a storm humming along the horizon. He traced the fuel line next, following it to a small aftermarket inline filter. It was positioned backward. He paused. Backward wasn't an accident. A shop made. It was a thing you did to make something almost run. The kind of sabotage that looked like incompetence, unless you knew better. A tiny chill slid down his spine and out through his fingers. Unexpected. There was a story folded into that backward filter. Whether it belonged to Reeves, or the so-called donor, or just the chaos of a long-abused engine, he couldn't say. He didn't look up. He rotated the filter, coughed up a trickle of stale gas into a rag from his pocket, then reseated the line, clamped snug. The rag burned his nose with the smell of old days. "Move, Ellison," Reeves said lightly. "Let the camera see." Only then did Marcus notice 2 phones raised at the edges of the crowd. Not official, just curious. The world liked a show. He wiped his hands and stepped to the passenger side fender, eyeing the ignition wiring. The main ground had fresh bright metal, where someone had scraped it again, a near miss repaired halfway. He loosened the bolt, burnished the contact clean, and retightened it. The small tool flicked in his hand, a metronome for nerves he couldn't afford. He heard his mother's voice then, overlapping with his father's, Angela at the sink late one night, telling him the truth flat: "You can do everything right, and they'll still call you lucky, so do it right anyway." He steadied his breathing. "Right anyway." "Hey Reeves," someone called. "Why's the fuel filter backwards?" A boy near the front had finally noticed. The question hung in the room like a lit match. Reeves didn't skip a beat. "Because it's junk, Carter. Junk is wrong in at least 3 places. You'd know that if you read the manual I posted." A few kids snorted. The moment slid past, but a new awareness prickled the room. It wasn't just a dead engine. It was a puzzle that seemed to have been arranged to fail. Marcus stepped around to the stand, found the battery switch, and toggled it off and on to feel the resistance. Solid. He traced the lead to the starter relay. Old but intact. He exhaled. One last pass with his eyes, hoses, clamps, cap, coil, and the lines of tension inside him aligned like gears catching teeth. He reached for the ignition switch, mounted on the rolling stand. The class noise thinned, not into silence yet, but into a tremor of anticipation. It was the moment right before a roller coaster tips. "Count it," someone dared. He said 5. Reeves glanced at the wall clock. "On my mark. Try not to injure the corpse." Marcus didn't move his hand. He set it there and let the seconds drip. The garage from his memory returned, fuller now. The night his father had taught him about can timing with a paper straw and a flashlight. The afternoon they'd celebrated an old engine's first cough like a small victory in a long war. The morning the house had gone too quiet. He pulled a breath deep enough to anchor him. "Now," Reeves announced. The room thinned to a single line. Marcus turned the ignition. 1. Nothing but the whine of the starter spinning air. 2. A cough, as if something remembered what lungs were for. "Here we go," someone said, but it carried that tone. Hope braced for failure. 3. A hiccup that shook the stand, a heartbeat out of order. "Come on," Marcus murmured, barely audible. 4. The cough became a grasp, a catch, the engine choosing whether it wanted to live. A girl near the front reached a hand toward her mouth, eyes wide. The laughter had drained away, replaced with a careful quiet, as if sound itself might scare the thing off. 5. The V8 slammed into life with a roar so sudden the fluorescent fixtures rattled. It wasn't a polite idle. It was a deep-chested bellow, the kind that filled your ribs from the inside and decided how your heart should beat. The stand shivered. Dust lifted off the block in a ghostly veil. A length of abandoned blue shop towel fluttered from under the engine like a flag surrendering to gravity. For a breath, no one spoke. The shock had weight. Then sound rushed back. Gasps. A half-formed cheer. An involuntary no way from a boy who'd scoffed the loudest. Phones tilted upward to catch the moment because it didn't seem real unless captured. Marcus didn't smile. He listened. The idle smoothed after a few seconds, settling into a cadence that felt like relief. He glanced at oil pressure. Good. He leaned an ear for the telltale tap of a lifter. Quiet. For a machine called a corpse, it felt surprisingly eager to be alive. Reeves didn't move. His expression didn't quite land. Caught between disdain and disbelief, it hovered like a look that had never been rehearsed. He opened his mouth, closed it, then forced a thin smirk back into place like a mask. "Well," he said, voice tight, "congratulations on animating junk." The boy by the parts cabinet spoke too loudly. He did something before he started it. Cheated.
What'd he do?
Someone asked, already wanting the answer to be something other than skill. "He touched it, that's what." Another muttered. "Made it look fancy." Marcus reached for the switch to kill the engine, but paused. The backward filter, the nearly proud cap, the deliberately imperfect ground. He hadn't imagined them. He looked up and found Reeves's eyes, not to gloat, but with a different question. Who set this up to fail? The heat of the running engine washed over his hands, while the cold of that thought moved through his chest. A small unexpected detail snagged his attention. Wedged beneath the stand's caster wheel, nearly hidden by grime, was a laminated tag, half ripped, the print smeared by oil. He could make out 3 letters and a number, RV, the same code he'd seen once in a forum thread about training rigs, designed to teach diagnostics under constraint, engines intentionally configured with layered faults to trap beginners into bad conclusions. He blinked. This wasn't a stray junkyard find. It was a rig meant to humiliate or to teach, depending on who held the marker. "Turn it off," Reeves said, louder now. The request sounded like order, the compliment stripped away. Marcus flicked the switch. The engine dropped into silence that felt for a long second, heavier than the roar had been. No one moved. The room felt off balance, as if gravity had shifted by a degree. The silence stretched thin, then a phone buzzed against a workbench, a tiny insect hum that snapped everyone back into the present. "That was luck," someone said, aiming the word, like a dart. Marcus wiped his hands, the rag now black with old fuel and new proof, and set the screwdriver back in his pocket. He could explain what he'd done. Timing, ground, filter. He could point to the tag under the caster, the kind of twist that made the game feel rigged. He could ask the question aloud, but the garage in his memory had taught him another truth. Sometimes the explanation doesn't win you anything but an argument you didn't ask for. He stepped back from the stand. A breath crossed the room, almost like a collective exhale. And then, unexpected again, the engine coughed once, with the switch off. A residual fire through the cylinders that shouldn't have happened, and the whole cart shuddered an inch forward. Someone yelped. The gloves atop the valve cover slid and fell, slapping the concrete. The class stared at the engine like it might lurch to life on its own. Reeves's eyes snapped to the ignition box, then to Marcus, then back to the box. Whatever he saw there took the color from his face by a shade. "Everyone back," he said sharply. Now. Chairs scraped. Shoes squeaked. Heat and attention poured toward the stand again. Marcus didn't move. He was listening, but not to the engine. He was listening to the new shape the room had taken. The suspicion sharpening. The teacher's voice pitched a degree higher. The quiet surprise inside himself that felt like both victory and warning. With the class pressed away from the stand, Marcus reached under the caster to pry loose the ruined tag, and froze as he realized the letters weren't RVS at all, but R. Reeves scrawled in permanent marker across the underside, the same hand that wrote detentions on the whiteboard, right as the engine, dead seconds ago, roared back to life on its own, shaking the floor. The second ignition wasn't a roar this time, so much as a claim. The V8 settled into a steady hum, low and confident, like it had decided to live out of spite. Dust trembled along the workbench edge. The class froze in a single posture of disbelief, arms halfway raised, mouths half open, and then a few scattered cheers escaped, small but honest, as if relief had found a crack to slip through. "Yo, that's insane," Carter blurted, laughing once in astonishment. He did it again. A girl near the front clapped her palms together before she realized no one else was following. Her sound died mid-echo, absorbed by the way Mr. Reeves's face had changed. The surprise was gone. In its place, something darker. A flush working up his neck, a stiffening around the jaw that looked like humiliation hardening into intent.
"Back from the dead twice," someone said, half joking, half afraid.
"Or staged," another voice cut in. Quicker this time, eager to steer the moment. Marcus stepped away from the stand with his hands open, palms up, as if distance and honesty could be made visible. The engine's smooth cadence poured warm air over his fingers. He didn't smile. If anything, his focus sharpened on the feel of the room, the tilt of it, and on the smear of permanent marker he'd just seen under the caster. R. Reeves. That fact pulsed behind his eyes like a small, persistent light. Reeves lifted a hand. "Stay right there," he said, each word frosted over. It wasn't loud, but it had weight. The thin smile he wore earlier had disappeared. What remained was authority like a door slam. Marcus stopped. "I'm not touching it," he said quietly. "Switch is off." "Is it?" Reeves snapped back, pivoting toward the ignition box, then at the battery switch, then at the wiring loomed across the stand as if searching for an answer he had already chosen. "Interesting. Very interesting." Carter glanced at Marcus. "Dude, how did—" "Enough," Reeves barked, and the single word cut through curiosity like a blade. "Class, step back. Phones away. This is a lab, not a circus." A few students muttered as they lowered their cameras. The room took a collective step, heel squeaks and chair legs scraping the concrete, the sound of compliance layered with resentment. The V8 idled on, indifferent. Marcus swallowed, feeling the quiet press in around his ribs. His father's voice rose, unbidden and steady as a hand on his shoulder. "Some people hate to see you win, and they'll hate it most when you win clean." He breathed through that truth until it settled. He hadn't come here to fight anyone. He'd come to fix what was broken. Reeves walked to the stand, peering into the ignition box with performative care. "Tampering?" he announced, not so much discovering as declaring. "That's what we call it when someone alters a system without authorization. That or cheating." He straightened and faced the class, hands clasped behind his back the way he did when he lectured. "He wanted a show. He gave you one." A ripple of discomfort moved across the room. "Cheating? How?" Brianna asked, brow furrowing. "We watched him. He did." "You watched what he wanted you to see," Reeves replied, eyes sliding over her to land on Marcus. "Tell them, Ellison. Share the trick. Show us how you made an engine start with the switch off." Marcus kept his voice even. "I adjusted timing, corrected the fuel filter, cleaned to the ground. I turned it off. Whatever it just did." "Whatever it just did," Reeves repeated, almost savoring the echo. "An engine doesn't fire without spark. Spark requires control. Control can be bypassed." He nodded toward Marcus's backpack on the floor, the zipper still half open from earlier. "You bring any little gadgets from home? Remote starter? Hidden leads? Clever ways to make fools of your peers?" "Come on," Carter said, a flash of anger lifting into his tone. "You wheeled that thing in." Reeves turned his head slowly, gaze cooling. "Do you have information I don't, Mr. Carter?" Carter faltered. "No, I mean, Reeves continued. "We have an impossible engine that conveniently fails when I'm talking and conveniently runs when Ellison is performing." He returned to Marcus. "Do you expect me to believe coincidence? Or do you expect me to ignore the fact that you touched the ignition system, the fuel system, and then surprise showtime?" The words weren't shouted. They were built, brick by brick, until the pattern they created was a wall. Marcus felt the familiar cornering, not the kind that blocked exits, but the kind that boxed in truth until it looked like a lie. He glanced at the underside of the stand again. He didn't see the marker now, but the ghost of the letters remained in his mind. He could say it out loud. He could hold the tag up like an exhibit. He could ask why a donated corpse carried his teacher's name where only a careful hand would find it. He didn't get the chance. "Open your bag," Reeves said. Marcus blinked. "What?" "Open your bag." Reeves's voice was quieter now, which somehow made it worse. "If there's nothing in there, we'll all feel terribly silly. If there is, well, we'll have the truth." "Since when do we search students?" Brianna asked, arms crossing reflexively. "That's not since academic integrity is at stake," Reeves shot back. "Unless you think it's fine to let a classmate game the system because the spectacle was entertaining." A low voice near the back added, "He always thinks he's smarter." It wasn't loud, but it was aimed. "Figures he'd have something." "Yeah. Figures," someone echoed, as if the word had been waiting on their tongue. Marcus felt the first sharp edge of anger, not the kind that burns through judgment, but the kind that clarifies it. He crouched, unzipped the bag, and lifted it so everyone could see inside: the red-handled screwdriver, a set of sockets, a rag dark with fuel, a dog-eared composition notebook. No mysterious black box, no remote. Reeves peered in, then gestured with 2 fingers. "Notebook." Marcus passed it over. Reeves flipped pages fast, as if proof would appear like a confession written in a childish hand. He paused at a sketch of a distributor with notes about timing drift and camware. He held it up to the class. "You see?" He came ready. "That's homework," Brianna said, incredulous. "It's literally notes." "It's preparation to manipulate a demonstration," Reeves countered smoothly. "There's a difference between learning and staging." Marcus met his teacher's eyes. "You're angry I fixed it." "I'm angry you think I'm stupid," Reeves snapped, the mask slipping for a breath before he tugged it back on. "I'm angry you turned my classroom into an audition for likes." Phones, which had settled at pockets and desktops, inched up again, drawn by the gravity of a confrontation. The room seemed to tighten, until the space between people felt thinner than air. "Let me ask a different question," Marcus said, hearing his voice stay calm, even as heat crept up his neck. "Why does the stand have your name under the caster?" A few heads swiveled toward the base of the stand. Reeves didn't look. He smiled, small, fixed. "We label equipment here, Ellison." "With permanent marker on the underside?" Marcus asked. "Like something you didn't want seen." "Enough," Reeves said, the word a closing door. "You're deflecting." He turned to the class. "Let me be clear. Academic misconduct is not a joke. If you're caught falsifying a demonstration, the consequences are severe." "I didn't falsify anything," Marcus said. "Check the filter direction. Check the ground. Check the timing marks. You'll see exactly what I touched." Reeves nodded as if humoring him. "By all means." He pointed to Carter. "Kill the battery switch." Carter hesitated, then reached out and flicked it. The engine had already been silenced, but the gesture felt ceremonial. Reeves popped the distributor cap, glanced inside, and snapped it shut with exaggerated care. He traced the fuel line, paused at the filter, rotated it back to the wrong orientation with a tiny practice twist, quick enough most would miss it. But Marcus didn't. The action was so smooth it almost felt like a tick. When Reeves looked up, his expression was neutral again. "Looks properly configured to me," he said, which suggests that if something was off, it got that way today. Brianna stared. "You just..." She stopped, words paling under the weight of authority. Marcus exhaled through his nose, steady. "Right anyway," his mother had said. He could feel how the narrative was being built around him like scaffolding. He could also feel the moment closing, the window narrowing to a slit. "Here's what's going to happen," Reeves said, palms flattening the air. "We're going to pause the lab. We're going to secure the equipment. And you, Ellison, are going to account for your actions to someone who's not me." Carter took half a step forward. "He just fixed an engine we all said was dead." "Why are we?" "Because integrity matters," Reeves said, clipping each syllable. "Because this is a school, not a theater. Because the line between talent and trickery is thin. And some of you can't see it yet." Marcus felt a wash of tiredness under his ribs, the kind that wasn't about sleep, but about being seen wrong on purpose. He looked at the stand again, at the wires, at the way the filter now sat just slightly off. He looked at the faces, some open and uncertain, some shut tight. He pictured his father's hands, steady in cold air. "Some people hate to see you win." He straightened his shoulders. "I'm ready to explain," he said, But I'm not going to give away every method I've learned. You said it was impossible. It wasn't. Reeves's mouth twitched. Refusing to disclose your method, he said, is refusing transparency. It's protecting knowledge I earned, Marcus answered. You taught us to diagnose. I did. A slow, sour sound rolled from the back. Not quite a laugh, not quite a groan. He's always got an answer, a boy muttered. Always a victim. When called out, Reeves lifted a hand, and the room quieted on instinct. His voice was calm again when he spoke, the calm of someone who had reclaimed the frame. Pack your things, he said to Marcus, tone frost smooth. We're going to the principal's office. You can explain your methods there. Brianna blurted. That's not fair. Fair is not my job, Reeves said. Standards are. Marcus bent to zip his bag, the red-handled screwdriver sliding into the side pocket. He felt the eyes on him the whole time, the ones that wanted him to be guilty so that the world could go back to simple, and the ones that wanted him to be right because something in them needed that proof. He stood, lifted the strap to his shoulder, and looked once more at the engine, humming in the echo of its own recent life. Let's go, Reeves said, moving to the door, his hand already at the knob like a verdict. As the class parted to make a lane, Principal Karen Dwyer's voice crackled over the intercom. Miss Reeves and Marcus Ellison to the office. Immediately, just as Brianna's phone lit up with a new notification. A video of the engine starting with the switch, clearly off, already posted and exploding with views. The walk to the principal's office felt longer than it should have. Marcus wasn't handcuffed, but the air in the hallway carried the same weight as a perp walk. The echo of their shoes on linoleum, the sidelong glances from students leaning in doorways, the way Mr. Reeves kept a full step ahead, as though even walking beside Marcus would be a concession. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Reeves's silence was practiced, the kind that could be interpreted as calm professionalism, but Marcus recognized it as a mask, the prelude to a performance. The office door loomed at the end of the corridor, its frosted glass panel stenciled with Karen Dwyer, principal. Behind it, Marcus knew, was a space where the rules bent to the person holding the pen. Reeves pushed the door open without knocking. We're here, he announced, as if arriving with a delivery. Principal Dwyer looked up from her desk, glasses low on her nose. She was in her late 40s, with a sharp, contained manner, and the kind of posture that seemed to scold without a word. Her office was neat, the kind of neat that didn't invite comfort. Certificates lined the wall behind her, but it was the row of black binders on the shelf to her left that Marcus noticed. Each was labeled with a year, and each seemed to hum with the quiet weight of past incidents filed away like preserved insects. Mr. Reeves, she said, setting down her pen, and Marcus Ellison. The way she said his name wasn't hostile, but it wasn't warm either, like she was already bracing herself for disappointment. Sit. Marcus lowered into the chair opposite her desk, the vinyl seat cool against his palms. Reeves took the one beside him, folding his hands in his lap, with the composure of a man certain of the outcome. Reeves began before she even asked. We had a lab demonstration today involving a defective V8 engine. It was a controlled example, meant to teach students the limits of repair work. Marcus decided to make it a spectacle. He tampered with the equipment, misled his classmates, and attempted to undermine my authority in the process. Marcus's jaw tightened. I fixed it. Reeves gave a small, almost indulgent laugh. If by fixed you mean manipulated in such a way that... Dwyer held up a hand, one at a time. She turned to Marcus. Is that true? Did you attempt to perform? The word was light in her tone, but it landed heavy. Perform, as though he were a street magician pulling coins from behind ears, not a student applying what he'd learned. I repaired it, Marcus said evenly. It started and ran, twice. I used standard tools, the same as in class. I didn't bring anything extra, except my own tools. No electronics, no remote starter. Dwyer leaned back slightly, her pen tapping the desk once. And why do you think your teacher interpreted it differently? Because he wanted to, Marcus thought. Because it's easier to believe the black kid showed off than that he knew more than you gave him credit for. But he didn't say it like that. Maybe because I didn't do it the way he expected, Marcus said instead. And maybe because the engine wasn't as broken as we were told. Reeves's head tilted, a smile ghosting his mouth. You see what I'm dealing with here. Marcus didn't rise to it. He was busy tracking the undercurrent in Dwyer's tone, the faint but present skepticism that clung to every question she asked him. The way her gaze lingered an extra beat, like she was scanning for tells, the way she emphasized your version. When she finally said, I need to be sure I understand your version of events. A small flashback pressed forward in his mind, unbidden but steady. He was 9 years old, sitting cross-legged in the backyard beside a lawnmower that hadn't run in 2 summers. His father, hands streaked with grease, crouched beside him. Carburetors clogged, his dad had said, handing him a wrench. You can do this part. Marcus remembered the thrill of loosening each bolt, of lifting the housing away to reveal the hidden machinery inside. They'd cleaned it together, reassembled it, and when the mower's pull cord brought the engine to life, his father had clapped him on the shoulder. Some things just need someone to believe they're worth fixing. Back in the principal's office, that memory settled into his chest like a counterweight against the room's tilt. Marcus, Dwyer said, breaking the silence. This is a serious matter. We can't have students undermining the learning environment, or causing disruptions. I wasn't disrupting, Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. I was solving the problem. That's what we're supposed to do in that class. Reeves gave a small, measured sigh, the kind meant for an audience. You're missing the point, Ellison. It's about respect. You don't grandstand in my classroom. You don't make me look foolish. I wasn't. Dwyer raised her hand again. Enough. Mr. Reeves, thank you. I'll take it from here. Reeves sat back, but the smugness in his posture didn't fade. We'll call your mother in, Dwyer said, shifting her attention fully to Marcus. This is serious. She deserves to be part of the conversation. Marcus nodded once, because there was nothing else to do without making it worse. Dwyer picked up the phone on her desk. While she dialed, Marcus looked past her, out the narrow window behind her desk. Outside, the sky was a dull February gray, the kind that made the whole day feel undecided. The call was short. Dwyer hung up and folded her hands on the desk again. She'll be here within the hour. Marcus kept his gaze steady.
Okay.
There was a beat of silence. Then Reeves leaned slightly toward Dwyer's side of the desk, lowering his voice just enough that it might have been for her alone. But Marcus caught every word. We'll make sure this one learns his place. The words didn't come with a sneer. They came softly, almost conversationally, and that made them worse. They slid under the skin in a way yelling never could. Marcus didn't react outwardly. Inside, he filed the sentence away alongside other quiet sentences he'd collected over the years, the ones said in tones that let the speaker claim later they'd meant nothing by it. He sat back in his chair, watching Reeves straighten again, his expression composed. Outside, the hallway carried the faint hum of lockers closing, and shoes moving toward the next class. Inside, the office felt like it had narrowed, the air thickened with something unspoken but undeniable. The door to the office opened, and Angela Ellison stepped inside, her coat still dusted with snow, her eyes sharp and already searching for the shape of the fight she was about to walk into. Angela Ellison closed the door softly behind her, the snow on her coat shoulders melting into small, stubborn droplets. She didn't rush. She took in the room in a single sweep, the binders, the framed certificates, the locked file cabinet in the corner, then let her eyes land on Marcus. He sat straight, jaw set, hands quiet in his lap. The look she gave him was a quick, private anchor. I'm here. Breathe. Ms. Ellison, Principal Dwyer began, rising half an inch from her chair, as though politeness were a muscle she didn't stretch often. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Wasn't a choice, Angela said, setting her purse beside the chair. Her voice was steady, low. What's going on with my son? Mr. Reeves leaned back with the composure of a man who believed the next 10 minutes had already been written in his favor. Your son created a disruption in my class, he said. He tampered with equipment, and when I questioned him, he escalated instead of cooperating. Angela's eyebrow lifted a millimeter. Escalated how? By performing, Reeves said, choosing the word again, as if repetition could make it fact. Grandstanding. He made it into a spectacle. I run a lab, Miss Ellison, not a theater. Angela looked at Marcus. Baby? He kept his voice calm, not small. He rolled in an engine and said it couldn't be fixed. I fixed it, twice. Reeves's mouth tightened. You see? Angela turned back to him. I see a difference between disruption and you didn't like the result. She sat, crossed her legs, and folded her hands on her knee. Posture precise. Why don't we start from the beginning, Mr. Reeves, and you can walk me through exactly what you saw. Dwyer gestured for Reeves to proceed. He did in smooth, pre-assembled sentences. He described a controlled example, A defective V8. Students confused and excited. Marcus touching systems without authorization. He slipped performance into the story twice more, regret into his tone once. The engine starting in suspicious circumstances. The engine starting again with the switch off. A bag with tools not approved for the lab. He delivered each brick of his narrative with care, building a structure he'd clearly expected to stand. Angela didn't interrupt. She listened. Head tilted slightly, eyes moving only when something didn't fit. When he finished, she waited a measured beat, and then nodded once, as if she'd just been handed a machine to examine. "Okay," she said. "My turn." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You described a defective engine, and a controlled example. What you wheeled into that room was a training rig set up to fail. Intentionally. I know because my husband used to supervise lines that shipped those engines, and I used to run quality on them. You don't call that a corpse. You call that a test." Reeves blinked, recovering fast. "I don't think. You don't have to think," she said. Not unkindly, just precise. "You used a rig with layered faults that would mislead a beginner. Backward filter, loose cap, dirty ground. That's not a random defect. That's pedagogy. Fine. But then my son spotted the pattern and corrected it. He didn't cheat. He did the assignment better than you expected." A flush climbed Reeves's neck. "With respect, Miss Ellison, I've taught this course for 22 years, and I've balanced spreadsheets with 10,000 unit recalls, and pulled night shifts on production. When a supplier tried to pass off bad parts," Angela said, eyes still steady, "longevity isn't proof. Results are." She flicked her gaze to Dwyer. "Did you watch the video your students took?" Dwyer's fingers stilled on the pen. "We don't condone recording in class." "That's not what I asked." Angela's tone didn't harden, but it didn't soften either. "Did you watch it?" Dwyer hesitated. "A small tell. I've seen clips," she said carefully. "They're inconclusive." Angela nodded once, as if she'd expected that. "Then let's stick to what's conclusive." Marcus's bag had a screwdriver and sockets. Standard. No remote triggers. No electronics. Nothing that would start an engine with the switch off. A second start. You know as well as I do a relay can stick, and a coil can hold charge enough for a residual pop if you've got slop in the ground. You also know what happens when someone rotates an inline filter backward and then pretends confusion. Reeves leaned forward. "Are you accusing me?" "I'm naming what I know," Angela said, each word placed like a bolt in a pattern. "You set a trap for beginners. My son wasn't one." The room's air shifted. Even Dwyer seemed to feel it. The tilt of the power balance when someone refuses to be intimidated. She cleared her throat. "Ms. Ellison, regardless of the rig's configuration, there are standards of classroom conduct."
"Absolutely," Angela said.
"Respect, safety, honesty, let's talk about those." She folded her hands again. "Respect is not telling a black child he's performing when he's succeeding. Safety is not whipping a class into suspicion because the wrong kid did the right thing. And honesty," she let that word hang, then looked directly at Reeves. "Honesty is not moving a filter back and then saying it was always right." Reeves's face went still. It was the kind of still that meant he was choosing his next expression like a tool from a drawer. He landed on weary patience. "With respect, you were not in the room." "My son was," Angela replied. "And you said something on the way in here. You said we'll make sure this one learns his place. Did I mishear Marcus when he told me that in the hallway just now?" Dwyer's posture snapped upright. Her gaze cut to Reeves. Reeves forced a small laugh. "I said we'd make sure we teach standards." If he misheard, Angela didn't look away. "We both know the difference between standards and place. One is policy. The other is a leash." Silence slid over the office. Taut and clean. Outside, a bell rang for the next period, and footsteps rushed the corridor. Inside, no one moved. Dwyer exhaled, long and slow. When she spoke, some of the iron had melted from her tone. "Miss Ellison, I appreciate your perspective. We have processes. An investigation will determine what happened in the lab. In the meantime, we have to address the disruption." "Address it how?" Angela asked. "By making my son sit in a room while rumor does your job for you." She shook her head once. "Black children get punished for excellence all the time. For being exceptional where they were expected to be invisible. You call it disruption when they refuse to stay small. You call it arrogance when they refuse to apologize for being good." Her monologue didn't swell. It deepened. She wasn't auditioning for sympathy. She was laying out a record. When Marcus was 9, he fixed our lawnmower with his father. That boy has been listening to engines longer than some folks have been listening to him. Every teacher who's ever watched him work knows he doesn't cut corners. He builds them straight. If you're going to suspend anybody, suspend the habit in this building that turns black skill into a threat. Reeves tried to step back into authority. We're landing on the truth, Angela said. Then to Dwyer, you can investigate, but you will not label this child dishonest on the way to that decision. You will not pull him out of class to make an example. If you need to observe him, you do it with fairness, with a third party in the room, and with the same grace you'd extend if his last name were carved on one of those plaques on your wall. Dwyer's eyes flicked to the plaques, then down. The pen on her desk had stopped tapping. She looked at Marcus, really looked, as if seeing the quiet steadiness that was easy to miss when you were searching for defiance. Marcus, she said, more measured now, if we allowed a supervised demonstration tomorrow with another instructor present, would you be willing to repeat what you did? Marcus held her gaze. Yes, he said. With all due respect, I won't be sabotaged again. Reeves bristled. No one's sabotaged. Dwyer lifted a hand toward him without taking her eyes from Marcus. And Miss Ellison, she added. I will review the lab equipment myself this afternoon. Angela nodded. Good. She rose, smoothing the sleeve of her coat, as she did. And you will call me for every step. No surprises. We've had enough of those. There was a beat where it seemed the meeting might end with a tentative truce. Then Angela added, almost conversationally, the twist she'd saved for the moment when people thought the machine was already reassembled. One more thing, she said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small plastic badge, the edges worn smooth. A laminated union card, Marcus's father's name printed in block letters, the plant logo faded with time. She placed it gently on Dwyer's desk. My husband taught apprentices before he died, students who now run machines that keep the lights on in this city. If you think we're going to let our son's name get written into some binder as a cautionary tale, you don't know our family. Dwyer looked at the card, then at the boy in front of her, and something in her posture softened again. Not surrender, but adjustment. Understood, she said. We'll proceed carefully. Angela gathered her purse. Do that. Because this isn't just about a lab. It's about a pattern. And the pattern stops today. She turned to Marcus, and her voice slid to something softer, meant only for him. They'll try to turn this into something it's not, she said. Don't let the story they want become the story you tell yourself. You hear me? I hear you, he said. They left the office together, Reeves trailing 2 steps behind. In the hallway, teachers pretended not to look. Students didn't bother pretending. The air buzzed with rumor electricity. Marcus felt the weight of it on his shoulders, and the steadier weight of his mother's presence beside him, keeping him upright. At the door, Angela paused. Snow had thickened into a curtain that blurred the parking lot, into a quiet shifting gray. Home, she said. We reset. That night, the house was underslept and overawake. Angela brewed tea. She didn't drink. Marcus took apart an old carburetor on the kitchen table, just to keep his hands busy. Laid the pieces on a dish towel like small metal bones. The world beyond their walls clicked and scrolled. At 2:17 a.m., Marcus's phone buzzed. Then again. Then in a chain of vibrations that turned the tabletop into a drum. At 2:17 a.m., Marcus's phone jittered across the kitchen table like it was trying to escape. Then again. Then again. Every buzz stacked onto the last, until the notifications formed a single breathless hum. Angela looked up from the mug she hadn't sipped. What's on fire? Marcus flipped the screen toward her. A grainy thumbnail of the auto tech lab filled it. The engine stand, the chalkboard, students in hoodies leaning in. The caption under the video read, he said 5 seconds. Watch the switch. The view counter leapt while they stared. 1,000. He tapped it open. The room's fluorescent wash spilled out. The camera angled from a workbench. His own voice barely audible. 5 seconds. The ignition switch clearly off. A beat, a cough, and then that sudden, impossible roar. The comments scrolled so fast they blurred.
No way. This is real.
Kid's a genius.
That teacher looks salty.
Fake remote starter under the cart. Duh. I know engines. That's legit timing correction. Why they always gotta be dramatic. Check the switch, y'all. Off means off. Angela's eyes narrowed at the username on the upload. iBrianna.tunes. Your friend? She sits up front, Marcus said. I didn't know she was recording. The next vibration wasn't another like. It was a DM request. Then a second, then 5. A stack from strangers with car emojis in their names. From accounts with no pictures. From people who talked like they knew him, and people who talked like he was a symbol they'd been waiting to argue with. He clicked another notification. A stitched reaction. A 30-something mechanic in a garage, 3 states away. Baseball cap backward. Pausing the clip frame by frame. "Y'all see that?" the man said, pointing at the distributor. Kid rolls it back a hair and seats the cap textbook. "And whoever set that filter, that's a prank," he called it. Respect. Between the praise came the other kind of attention. The comments he knew existed even before he saw them. "He's faking. Attention seeker." A string of laughing emojis followed by figures. Others didn't bother with code. The uglier words were there too. Typed fast and careless like litter tossed from a window. He didn't read them out loud. He didn't need to. Angela leaned closer, her hand finding the back of his neck for a second. "Breathe, baby." "I am," he said, even though his pulse had accelerated to meet the screen's pace. By 5 o'clock the video had crossed 50,000 views. By 6, local accounts had begun to repost. "Detroit kids out here doing the impossible." Jefferson High teacher tried it. Student said, "Hold my wrench." The phrasing turned the day into an allegory. Marcus watched himself become a headline and felt a strangeness like vertigo, as if he'd stepped off a curb he didn't know was there. At 7:12 a.m., a message arrived from a blue-checked account. Evan Cole, Local 12 News. "Marcus, I'm a reporter covering education and community. Would love to talk about your video. We're working on a segment for tonight. Short, on camera. Would you be open?" Angela read over his shoulder. "We don't have to do anything today," she said. "We can say no." Marcus stared at the line that said education and community. "If we don't say anything, they'll write around us." She nodded, weighing it. "Short, on our terms. And I'm there." He typed, "We can talk after school. At our house." School hallways had their own circulations of fame and rumor. By first bell, Jefferson buzzed with a frequency somewhere between pep rally and court hearing. Whispers trailed him like shadows. "That's him. 5 seconds. Saw it 3 times. Still wild." A freshman in a puffer jacket asked for a selfie. 2 juniors he'd never spoken to offered knuckles. Then from the locker bank by the stairwell, the other chorus, "Dude staged it. His mom probably set it up. Bet Reeves is going to end him." Brianna intercepted him outside homeroom, eyes wide and apologetic. "I didn't think it would blow up like this," she said, breath fast. It felt wrong, what he was saying." "It's okay," Marcus said. He meant it and didn't. "What did you write in the caption?" "Watch the switch," she admitted. Because it was off." "It was," he said. The memory of the engine's second stubborn ignition flickered behind his eyes. "Thanks for posting." She nodded, relief and fear mixed. "Just be careful. People are weird on the internet." They were weirder in person. In second period English, a boy 2 rows backstage whispered, "Encore," and made a V8 revving sound until Miss Phelps told him to be quiet. In the cafeteria, a group at the far table held their phones out like judges, replaying the moment and pausing at Marcus's hands. "Sleight of hand," one declared, like a magician. On his way to Autotech, he caught snippets near the trophy case. "If Mr. Reeves says it's fake, it's fake. Or he's embarrassed. He's been teaching forever." So, the lab door was propped open. Reeves stood at the front of the room, with an email printout in his hand. He looked like a man who'd been careful not to read comments but had read them anyway. "We will not," he announced before Marcus had even crossed the threshold, "allow a misrepresentation of this classroom to stand." He held up the paper. "I have notified administration that the video circulating online does not reflect the context of our lesson, the standards of our lab, or the truth." Marcus met his gaze. Didn't look away. "Which truth?" "The one where equipment was altered for spectacle," Reeves answered. "The one where a student refused transparency and undermined instruction." A handful of students shifted, uncomfortable. Others nodded, eager for the anchor of adult certainty. Carter raised a hand, but it started. Reeves's eyes slid to Carter. Displeasure cool as shade. "Engines sometimes start without being safe." The point was safety and procedure. "We saw the switch," Brianna said, voice steadier than her hands. "It was off." Reeves ignored her. "Phones in backpacks. We will not turn this class into content." Marcus took his seat. The engine stand in the corner seemed smaller today, as if notoriety had taken mass from it and redistributed it to the air. He could feel eyes on the side of his face like a heat lamp. He opened his notebook, not to take notes but to put his hands somewhere. At lunch, news reached him that the district had posted a neutral statement on their account. We are aware of a video circulating from Jefferson High. We value hands-on learning and safety. The matter is under review. 10 minutes later, the post disappeared. In its place, a different message. We support our educators. Comments immediately filled with screenshots of the first post and the accusation of backpedaling. Marcus watched the corporate tone wobble in public and felt something between vindication and dread. The reporter Evan Cole texted at 3. Angela replied from her phone. Yes, 15 minutes. No live shots. No backyard, either. Kitchen table is fine. He arrived in a beanie and an earnestness that seemed real. The camera operator was a woman with careful hands who asked where the outlet was and apologized for the light stand scraping the floor. Angela set out tea, untouched again. Evan's questions were gentle, but purposeful. Walk me through the 5 seconds, he said. Marcus did, not revealing the parts he wasn't ready to give away. I corrected timing. I fixed a backward fuel filter. I cleaned a ground. Engines are honest when you meet them, where they are. Evan's eyebrows lifted. That kind of TV empathy that reads as understanding on screen. And the second start? Residual charge. Stuck relay. It happens, Marcus said. Ask any mechanic. Do you feel targeted? Marcus glanced at Angela. Her look said, tell the truth, not the version that costs you sleep. He chose his words like he chose sockets. The right size. No rounding. I felt doubted on purpose, he said. And I hear the way some people talk when they want to make sure the wrong person doesn't get to be right. Evan's nod was slow. We'll be fair, he said, and something about his eyes made Marcus think he meant it. By evening the segment aired. It played the lab clip beside an interview with a retired shop teacher, who without heat, said, kudos to the kid. If he really reversed a filter and reset timing, that's not a prank, that's a win. The piece included a sentence from Reeves's emailed statement about safety and misrepresentation, and the district's review. The camera cut back to Marcus at the kitchen table, hands folded, not performing, just being. The last shot was Angela's union card on the fridge, the camera glancing it like a footnote that meant more than it looked. The internet responded with its usual certainty, and its opposite. Praise stacked up, specific and loud. The timing thing. Real mechanics know. Kid's got hands. Give him a scholarship. Accusations pressed back. Staged clout chasing. He thinks he's special, and threaded through both. Ugly lines that had nothing to do with engines. Full of words built to bruise. Around midnight, a new twist cleaved the timeline. Brianna posted an enhanced clip. She'd run the audio through a free app, and boosted the low frequencies. In the faint bed of noise under the engine's first life, a whisper surfaced, barely more than a breath. Learns his place. The caption, you tell me what that sounds like. The comments detonated. Some said it proved everything. Others called it a deepfake. A few insisted they heard nothing at all but what they'd been told to hear, which Marcus admitted was a point even evidence grew, or shrank depending on who looked. He set his phone face down. The silence in the house was heavy, but it was theirs. Angela folded him into a hug that didn't fix anything, and fixed enough. Tomorrow, she said, we go back. They did. Morning brought cameras across the street. Discreet and not so. A parent Marcus didn't know stopped Angela in the drop-off lane and said, we're with you, under her breath like solidarity was contraband. In the foyer, someone had printed a meme of Marcus holding a wrench like a trophy. Down the next hall, someone else had taped a flyer that read, Integrity Influence. In Autotech, Reeves pretended not to notice the space he took up. We will do a supervised demonstration at Friday's assembly, he announced to the class, eyes on a point just past Marcus's head. Our guest instructor from the district will oversee, will lay rumors to rest. Carter exhaled in a whistle. A whole assembly? Transparency, Reeves said. The community demands it. The rest of the day moved like thick liquid. Teachers kept trying not to bring it up, and then did anyway, their curiosity rebadged. As concern, 2 boys from the back row passed Marcus in the hall, and said, without stopping, magician, and laughed. Brianna pressed a folded note into his hand in chemistry. You okay? He nodded, not trusting the answer to fit on paper. The final bell released the building. Marcus's phone buzzed once in his pocket as he stepped outside into air that smelled like salt and exhaust. He thought it was another comment. It was. Subject line, truth. Sender no reply at Proton Mail. The rest truncated. He opened it. Thumb cold. Stop lying or else. Last warning. We know where you work your little tricks. There was no signature. Just a blurry cell photo attached. The corner of the auto tech lab. The engine stand's caster and a smear of permanent marker under it like a shadow. Marcus stared at the photo, his breath catching, as a second email landed. This one with a single sentence. Friday is your last 5 seconds. The first email still burned behind Marcus's eyes when the second one landed. Friday is your last 5 seconds. He read it twice, the way you read a sentence that feels like it's looking back. He tucked his phone into his backpack and told himself to breathe. Then the morning bell dragged him into motion, and the building swallowed him whole. Jefferson High sounded different now. Every conversation seemed to pause when he passed, then resume a half octave lower. Posters for the pep band concert fluttered on the cinder-block walls like they were nervous too. He kept his hood down and his head up, a technique he'd learned the hard way. Look confident enough to discourage attention, not so confident it becomes a dare. His locker stuck on the first pull, then gave with a groan. A folded sheet of paper lay on top of his textbooks. The edges smudged like it had been handled by someone who wanted to leave a little of themselves behind. He knew what it was before he opened it. You always know. Crude marker drawings bled through the page. A stick figure with skin colored in with dense slashes of black, lips exaggerated into a red, clownish O. Next to it the same stick figure crushed under an engine stand, wheels drawn as X's. Across the top, block letters, stop lying or get crushed. At the bottom a scrawl, learn your place. The P was a triangle. The S leaned forward, like it was in a hurry. His throat tightened, not with surprise, but with the dull ache of a bruise you'd hoped had healed. He slid the note back into the locker and stared at its metal interior. The chipped paint, the sticker from freshman year he'd never peeled off. For a moment the hallway sound narrowed to a single hiss, like air escaping a line. A memory pressed up through the floorboards of his mind without asking permission. His father years earlier, in a break room that smelled like burnt coffee and coolant, a metal locker there too. The same dent at the bottom edge where boots had kicked it open, one time too many, a greasy paper bag on the bench, a folded note, ugly in the same lazy way ugly things often are. Marcus was small enough then to be looking up at everything, including his father's face. You okay? Marcus had asked, because even at 9 he could read the set of a jaw. His father hesitated, then handed him the note. Go back to where you belong. That was all it had said. No drawing. No signature. The letters were the same. The rushed S. The hard-angled P. What did you do? Marcus asked. His father had taken a slow sip of coffee, eyes distant, then smiled in a way that didn't ask his face to play along. I finished my shift, he said. Then I fixed the machine that note writer jammed up, trying to scare me. Did you tell your boss? I told the truth, he said simply. And I kept my hands clean so the truth stood up when anyone looked. The memory slid away like a drawer closing. Marcus blinked and was back in the hallway, his ears filling again with the chaos of first period. Someone jostled his shoulder without apology. He didn't turn to see who. Brianna found him a minute later, her face already reading what his hadn't said. What happened? Nothing, he said automatically. She frowned. Don't nothing me. I can see you're nothing. It looks like a fire alarm with a sweater over it. He exhaled and opened the locker just enough to show her the folded page. She flinched when she saw it, an intake of breath that dotted the eyes of her outrage. We have to tell someone, she said. We will, he said, though we suddenly felt like a word you say when you don't want to be alone, even as the building tries to make you. After homeroom. They carried the note to the office like evidence across a courtroom. The secretary glanced at it with an expression that tried to be professional and landed on Weary. Mrs. Dwyer's not available, she said. Mr. Haynes, the dean, can see you. Haynes wore a tie that looked like it had been knotted quickly and a smile that telegraphed, let's not make a big deal. What have we got? He asked, leaning back in the chair so his hands could fold comfortably over a small belly. Marcus handed him the note. Haynes looked at it longer than the secretary had, then did the thing adults do when they want to communicate concern without committing to it. He frowned with his eyebrows and nodded with his jaw. Ugly, he said. as if describing weather. Kids can be real idiots. Kids? Angela's voice came like a new rule from the door. She'd come as soon as Marcus texted. She didn't bother with the secretary's formality. This was in my son's locker. Haynes straightened. Ms. Ellison. Of course. We take this very seriously. Good, she said. So do I. He cleared his throat, defensive now that he'd stepped on a word. We've been dealing with some mischief since the video. Teen pranks. You know how things spread online. Racism isn't a prank, Angela said. It's a message. It says, we see you and we want you gone. The drawing makes it violence. Don't soften it because the letters were written with a school marker. Haynes blinked. What makes you think? She pointed to the corner of the page. There, faint but legible, the ghost of a stamp, property of Jefferson Autotech. The paper wasn't notebook paper. It was a photocopy of the lab's safety checklist, printed on the back. Someone had flipped it over to draw their ugliness like it deserved a form. Haynes's mouth pinched. We'll look into it, he said. The half-promise of bureaucracy. We'll check cameras near his locker. Do that, Angela said. And check who has access to the supply closet with lab paper. You'll narrow your pool. He nodded, scribbling notes. In the meantime, Marcus, stay aware. Avoid the halls when they're crowded. Marcus almost laughed at that. Avoid the halls at a school. Instead he said, am I safe in class? Of course, Haynes said. And the of course was so quick that it felt like he'd had it ready in his pocket. They left with a case number. And the weight of being the kind of incident that goes into a binder. Angela squeezed Marcus's shoulder in the hallway. You want to go home? I want to finish the day, he said. I don't want to give them more. She studied him, then nodded. Text me if anything. Everything. I mean it. He nodded back. He meant it too. The day pressed on, but something had shifted. It wasn't just the note. It was the way people looked at him as if the note's ugliness had sprouted from him instead of toward him. In chemistry, a lab partner who'd always joked with him answered questions without eye contact. In history, a boy he sometimes traded quizzes with kept his paper face down, scribbling his name hard twice as if to announce ownership. Even Brianna seemed to orbit him carefully, as though proximity might ricochet something her way. Isolation is a slow-falling net. It doesn't drop all at once. It gathers you an inch at a time. By the last bell, Marcus felt it cinched at his shoulders. He cut down a side corridor to avoid the after-school rush, and found the building emptying itself through doors propped with wedges that squeaked. He ducked into the auto tech lab to grab his notebook. The room was dim and colder than usual, the hum of the ventilation louder in the quiet. The engine stand sat in the corner like a parked accusation. On Reeves's desk, a stack of worksheets sat face down. The top sheet bled faint ink from a signature stamped too hard. R. Reeves. The letters made his back go rigid, not because he hadn't seen them, but because he'd seen them somewhere else, under the caster in permanent marker. Forgot something. Reeves's voice came from the doorway. Marcus turned, schooling his face back to neutral. My notebook, he said. He kept his tone mild, a setting he'd learned to use like a tool. Reeves walked to the workbench, as if to retrieve something of his own. Busy day for you, he said. You've made quite a name. I didn't make anything, Marcus said. It happened. Things don't just happen, Reeves replied. People create them. Marcus didn't answer. The lab smelled like solvent and winter coats drying out. He picked up his notebook and slid it under his arm. Reeves's eyes tracked to Marcus's locker visible through the doorway window, where the hallway lockers lined up like soldiers. I heard about the note. It was on a lab sheet, Marcus said before he could stop himself. Reeves's eyebrow lifted. We do recycle paper around here. Is that what you call it? Marcus said, then wished he hadn't. Reeves smiled with only his mouth. You should be careful with accusations you can't support. His gaze dropped, then rose again like he'd measured something. Friday, he said, shifting topics. There's going to be an opportunity to settle all this nonsense. An investigation? Marcus asked. A demonstration, Reeves corrected. Public. Transparent. We've scheduled an assembly. The district's sending a guest instructor. You'll show us all, under supervision, whatever it is you did. No edits. No special angles. It's the only way back from spectacle to standards. The words landed like a challenge, wrapped in a favor. Marcus felt his pulse pick up. Part of him was relieved, a chance to untangle the knot in public under rules that weren't his teachers alone. Another part flared with warning. Publicity is a two-edged blade. the wrong hand swing it like a weapon. Who asked for this? He said. He already knew. I did, Reeves said, the admission clean and proud. The community deserves clarity. Marcus thought of the emails. Friday is your last 5 seconds. The coincidence rang too precisely to be coincidence. He slid his notebook into his backpack to hide the way his hand had gone unsteady. The hallway outside swelled with after-practice foot traffic. Voices rose, then fell into the layered murmur of kids leaving the building. The day exhaling, Marcus moved toward the door. Ellison, Reeves said, stopping him without stepping closer. If there's something you want to confess before Friday, my inbox is open. Private is kinder than public. Marcus turned. For a second he saw his father in the way his own chin tilted, in how his voice settled in his chest before he spoke. I don't have anything to confess. Reeves's smile didn't change. We'll see. On the walk home, the sky had that flat, frozen look, Detroit perfected in February, the kind that made neon signs feel like warmth. Marcus kept to the sidewalks he knew, and let the cold clear the static from his head. He replayed the day and found himself editing, deleting the looks that cut too deep, pausing at the small moments that had held. A cafeteria worker had slipped him an extra slice of bread, with a nod that said, eat. Brianna had texted a wrench emoji and a heart she deleted, and then sent anyway. His mother had answered every call on the first ring. At the kitchen table, he set the racist note down next to the old Union card on the fridge, the two artifacts staring at each other across 15 years. Angela picked the note up with 2 fingers like it was something corrosive. We file this, she said, and we copy. I don't get to lose it. He nodded. Reeves announced a public demo, he said. Angela's eyes narrowed. Of course he did. They're bringing in someone from the district to supervise. She exhaled, then paced without meaning to, stopping only when her palm found the counter's edge. You don't have to do this, she said. We can say no. We can say not, until the threats stop. We can say not, under this teacher. Marcus stared at the washer-scarred screwdriver lying next to the note, his father's favorite one, the red handle familiar as his own palm. If I don't, he said, they win the story by default. Angela's jaw worked. I hate that you're right. The house went quiet in that way, that precedes hard decisions. The furnace clicked on. A car door shut outside. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice, and gave up. Marcus closed his eyes and pictured the engine, the quiet truth of timing marks aligning, the clean feel when a ground finally seated. He needed that sensation more than he needed anyone's approval. He was almost steady when his phone buzzed again. New email, subject line empty. Body, tick tick, no attachment, no signature, just the sound of someone who thought fear could keep time. He set the phone down and looked at Angela. Friday, he said. Friday, she repeated. The word a promise and a warning. The next morning, the intercom crackled during homeroom, and Mr. Reeves's voice, tight and controlled, filled every classroom. Attention, Jefferson. This Friday, we invite the entire school to a live demonstration in the gym to verify claims circulating online. Attendance is mandatory. The line went dead, and a second later, Marcus's phone vibrated with a new message from the same anonymous account. See you on stage. By Friday afternoon, the gym was breathing. It had that crowded, living pulse, bleachers groaning under the weight of students and staff, the basketball hoops cranked up to the rafters, the air tasting like dust, and popcorn salt someone shouldn't have smuggled in. News vans idled out front. A tripod forest sprouted along the top row where local media had been allowed to film with limited access, which meant as much access as they could quietly take. Marcus stood just inside the double doors, with Angela at his shoulder. He could feel eyes snag on him as he walked, curiosity first, then recognition, then whatever came after recognition. The whispers sounded like wind moving through tall grass. Constant, shapeless, surrounding. Breathe, Angela said, barely moving her lips. I am, he answered, and found that he was. The email Friday is your last 5 seconds still lived in his pocket, but the noise in his head had tuned itself to a cleaner frequency. He wasn't here for applause or defense. He was here for the truth of bolts and timing. Engines didn't care who doubted you. They only cared if you heard them right. On the court, a folding table had been turned into a makeshift stage, cords snaked to a small PA. The district banner hung behind it, wrinkled like someone had unrolled it for the first time in a decade. Center court, mounted on a wheeled stand, sat the day's test. Not the rusty V8, but a smaller inline-4, cleaner, painted the kind of industrial gray that refuses attention. A digital tack readout had been taped to the stand with gaffer tape. Beside it, a toolbox with a lock, everything labeled. Mr. Reeves stepped to the mic with the gravity of a man about to restore order. "Good afternoon, Jefferson," he said, voice amplified into every dead spot of the gym. "Thank you for your attention and your respect." He gestured to the engine. "We're here today to demonstrate standard, to show that in this building we value safety, procedure, and truth." Polite applause answered. It sounded like people clapping with their fingers. "Our guest instructor," Reeves continued, "is Mr. Tom Daly from the district's Career and Technical Education Office." A man in a navy polo and a lanyard stepped forward, salt and pepper hair cropped short, boots that had seen real floors. He nodded to the crowd with an expression that said, "I've been in gyms like this my whole life." "And," Reeves said, letting his eyes swing to Marcus like a camera pan, "we have Marcus Ellison, the student at the center of this conversation. He will attempt under supervision to repair a machine designated as non-functional for training purposes. He will not be rushing. He will be safe. He will explain each step. If he succeeds, we will applaud the learning. If he does not, we will applaud the attempt. Either way, we will remember that nothing good comes from spectacle without substance." It was the tone of a principal at graduation, and a referee at once. Some students cheered anyway, because cheering is a reflex, in rooms like this. Others watched in the charged quiet of curiosity. Tom Daly shook Marcus's hand when he climbed the steps to the floor. His handshake was solid, neither power play nor limp. Up close, his eyes were warmer than his polo suggested. "You ready?" he said, low enough to keep off the microphones. "Yes, sir," Marcus said. "Good," Daly said. "Two rules. You narrate your moves as you make them. You touch nothing electrical until I clear it. Deal?"
Deal.
Angela took a seat in the first row behind the scorer's table, near an exit she could see with one glance. She folded her hands, unclenched them, refolded them. Reeves made a show of unlocking the toolbox and placing a small curated set of tools beside the engine. A socket set, a feeler gauge, a test light, a multimeter. He lifted the red-handled screwdriver from his pocket. Marcus's heart jolted, until he saw it wasn't his father's, just the same brand, and set it down with a clack as if to say, "See? Nothing up anyone's sleeve." The mic caught the sound and magnified it, making it ceremonial. "Before we begin," Reeves said, "Mr. Daly will verify our setup." Daly worked without flourish, hands efficient. He checked the fuel line, the coil, the battery switch, the ignition box. He narrated with a dry cadence that calmed the room. "Inline filter present. Oriented interestingly." He rotated it half a degree, and then rotated it back, eyes flicking once toward Marcus like a joke only they would catch. "Distributor cap seated. Wiring harness appears intact. Ground to frame. A little corrosion. We'll clean that." Reeves's jaw flexed just once. "We want to simulate a realistic shop environment," he said into the mic. "Aging parts. Typical wear." Daly shrugged, unbothered. "Realism's fine. Safety is finer." He turned to Marcus. "Tell me your plan." Marcus swallowed, stepped closer to the stand, and let his voice find its level. "I'm going to inspect timing, fuel delivery, and grounds. I'm not assuming the failure they told me. I'm going to find the failure that's there." Ripples of sound moved through the bleachers. The quote was clean enough to be tweetable. Angela smiled without moving her mouth. "Begin when ready," Daly said. The countdown came from the student section before anyone official could announce it. 10, 9, 8. A chant that turned the gym into a stadium for a sport no one had practiced. It caught even teachers in its current. By 3, Marcus had chosen not to look up again. The world would always try to claim your eyes when precision needed them most. He started at the distributor, cap loose by a whisper. He loosened, realigned, tightened, 3 crisp turns, correcting cap alignment, he said, and the mic on the stand picked up his voice, threading it through the rafters. He traced the fuel line. The inline filter sat backwards, of course. He held it up to the crowd like evidence, and then turned it quietly, emptying a stringy amber line of stale fuel into a rag that Daly held out without being asked. "Filter reversed," he said, correcting flow. He followed the ground to the frame, scraped the contact with the back of the screwdriver, until bright metal shone through the dull, Cleaning ground, he said. Bad grounds make good engines look bad. Laughter, quick and surprised, broke along the faculty row. Even humor could be a lesson. He turned the crank with a ratchet to feel compression. It resisted with the stubbornness of a thing that wanted to be left alone. He coaxed it 2 revolutions anyway, listening the way his father had taught him. Eyes first, fingers second, ears last. Far up in the bleachers, someone started a video on their phone and forgot to mute it. The delayed sound of his own voice from an earlier interview rose and died like a ghost. Daly hovered where he needed to, and nowhere else. Reeves kept a careful distance, arms folded the way people fold their arms when they want to look neutral and feel powerful. He cut glances toward the news cameras, their tiny red lights blinking like vigilant pupils. "Ready to test?" Daly asked. Marcus nodded. Throttle cracked, fuel line secure, cap seated, ground cleaned. He let his hand settle on the switch. The gym's murmurs tightened to a near silence. Air has a sound when 300 people hold their breath at once. He turned the ignition. The starter spun. A cough. Nothing. He didn't flinch. "Again," he said, mostly to himself. He toggled off, then on. Second try. A sputter became 3 uneven beats, then a stall. The crowd's sound rose like a question. "Timing's close," he said, eyes on the mark he'd chalked. He loosened the hold down, shifted the distributor a hair, tightened. Third time. Someone in the back yelled, 5 seconds. Someone else hissed, "Shut up. Voices are weather." He let them pass. He turned the key. The inline 4 caught with a sudden gruff eagerness, then smoothed into a steady idle that wasn't pretty but wasn't sick either. The tack climbed to 900, hesitated, settled at 750, like it needed a second to trust itself. The gym exhaled as one organism. Applause broke from scattered corners, then gathered into a crest, writing the relief that comes when a narrative you feared would swallow you spits you back out whole. Kids whistled. A teacher clapped into her sleeve like she was trying not to be seen. Cameras zipped their focus rings smoother, hunting for the angle that would make sense later. Reeves stepped back to the mic before anyone could call it finished. "Good," he said, and the word had edges. "Now diagnostics. Mr. Ellison will illustrate proper electrical testing and will confirm no hidden devices are." Daly raised a hand, not quite blocking him, but rerouting the flow. "We'll test," he said. "Step by step." He turned to Marcus. "Kill it." Marcus flicked the switch. The engine died obediently. He reached for the multimeter, and there it was again, the quiet wrong. In the second after silence, he heard a faint buzz where there shouldn't have been one, like a relay hanging onto a memory it hadn't been given permission to keep. He followed the sound with his eyes and saw the tiniest tremor in a wire at the ignition box. A shiver so small it was more idea than motion. "Hold," he said. He dropped to a knee, tracing the harness with his fingertips. He found a splice tucked under a strip of black tape, so carefully cut it, looked factory. He peeled it. Underneath, 2 wires met that had never been meant to meet. A bypass. Elegant. Hidden. The breath that moved across the gym wasn't a sound so much as a weather front. Reeves took 1 step forward and then the step back that says "I didn't." Daly crouched beside Marcus, squinting. He didn't touch it. He didn't have to. "You seeing what I'm seeing?" "Yeah," Marcus said, and the mic carried his voice across the room like testimony. Someone wanted a shadow spark. The words weren't accusatory. They were anatomical. He felt the old anger move through him like current anyway. Not because he'd been tricked, but because someone had tried to make the truth look like a trick. Daly stood, lifted his hands for the room. "We'll correct that," he said evenly. "Then we'll finish. Integrity before entertainment." He nodded to the custodian near the wall to bring the tape, to the assistant principal to keep the aisle clear, to Reeves without saying his name. He let the pause stretch long enough for everyone to recognize it. The bend in the story where intention gets seen. Marcus rewrapped the splice with fresh tape, isolating what shouldn't touch. He rechecked the ground. He put the cap back on, like returning a hat to a head. He breathed once, long. "Final test," Daly said into the mic, and the crowd quieted so fast that the squeak of a sneaker on court sounded like a shout. Reeves's face had gone to the color of paper. Angela's hands were still now, flat on her knees. Brianna's phone was raised and shaking only slightly. Marcus set his fingers on the switch. He wasn't thinking about emails or bleachers or the shape humiliation takes when it's cornered. He was thinking about his father's voice. The problem is never what they tell you it is. He was thinking about the smallness of parts and the bigness of a room, and the narrow beam of attention where truth lives. He turned the key. The engine took a breath, and the entire gym went black. The lights snapped off with a sound like a gasp. The scoreboard died. The PA popped and fell silent. For a beat there was nothing but the echo of 300 throats catching, and the faint, eerie whir of a fan winding down. Somewhere a teacher said, too loudly, "Stay calm." A phone flashlight flared, then another, and another, constellations blinking into a night that shouldn't have existed. In the pulsing dark, the engine coughed once in defiance, and as Marcus's eyes adjusted he saw, in the sudden galaxy of phones, a silhouette by the breaker panel, hand still on the switch. For a heartbeat, the gym was silent, then darkness swallowed the space whole. A few gasps, the clatter of dropped phones, and a rising hum of whispers filled the void. The overhead lights, scoreboards, and mic systems had all gone dead at once. Someone near the bleachers muttered, "Must be a breaker," but Marcus didn't buy it. He stood frozen beside the half-reassembled engine, the crowd's eyes, now invisible, but still heavy on him. Sweat beaded at his temples, not from the heat, but from something deeper. The timing was too perfect, too clean. Somewhere in the dark, Mr. Reeves barked, "Everyone stay calm." Probably just a blown fuse. But Marcus caught the edge in his voice. It wasn't concern. It was calculation. Up in the stands, Angela Ellison shoved through the crowd, pushing past teachers and students. She found Principal Dwyer by the entrance, whispering with the janitor. "Karen," Angela snapped, voice sharp as broken glass. "You think I'm stupid?" Principal Dwyer turned, all performative calm. "Angela, it's just a technical issue. We'll have it resolved." "Don't." Angela stepped closer. "You knew this challenge was a setup. Reeves couldn't beat him fair, so you turned off the lights." Her voice dropped lower. "You're not protecting a school. You're protecting a man who's scared of being outdone by a black boy." Dwyer's smile faltered. She looked around as if searching for support, but the gym was still in chaos. "That's a serious accusation." Angela leaned in, eyes locked. "So is sabotaging a child." Down below, Marcus took a deep breath. He pulled his phone from his pocket and turned on the flashlight. The white beam cut through the dark, landing on the exposed engine. His classmates had scattered to the edges, unsure if they should leave or watch, but the front row, the doubters, were still there, waiting to see him fail. His hand trembled as he reached for the socket wrench. He could still hear Reeves's challenge ringing in his ears. "Let's see what you really know." He didn't speak. He didn't perform. He just worked. Each twist of the wrench was a memory, his father's calloused hands guiding his grease under their fingernails. Oldies crackling from a busted garage radio. "Trust the sound," his father used to say. "Engines don't lie, people do." The final bolt clicked into place. He stepped back, flipped the ignition, and held his breath. Vroom! The engine roared to life with a clarity and power no one expected. Even through the darkness, the sound wrapped around the gym like a thunderclap. Pure, unmistakable triumph. And then came the cheers. From the back, from the bleachers, from the students who hadn't dared before. Shouts, whistles, clapping that echoed off the gym walls like defiance. Reeves stood by the exit, frozen. His face had drained of all color. No smirk, no sneer, just a pale, trembling man, staring down the fact that he'd lost control. He turned and walked out without a word, his footsteps sharp against the gym floor. Behind him, the engine purred like it had something to prove. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't raise his hands in victory. He just stared after Reeves, chest rising and falling, trying to breathe through the noise and the heat of 100 eyes on him. That's when he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned. A man stood there with a press badge clipped to his collar and a notebook in hand. He looked about 30, sharp-eyed, like he'd been watching from the shadows all along. "You need to know," the journalist said, voice low but urgent. "Who's behind this?" Evan's paper was warm from his palm. Under the emergency lights it looked both official and illicit, like something that belonged in a file drawer, and a whisper at once. Marcus scanned the page, the supplier code, the part number matching the ignition box model, the timestamps that lined up with late afternoons, and then the last line that hooked his eye and held it. Personnel incident, prior employer, dismissal, following discrimination complaint. The name beside it, Walter J. Reeves. "Not exactly," Jessica said, Careful. The official term was mutual separation. That's what they print when the legal department is tired. It followed 3 complaints in 2 years, 2 from hourly workers, 1 from an apprentice. All black. 1 complaint alleges he engineered no-win diagnostics that guaranteed failure in front of senior staff. Angela stiffened beside him. No win, she repeated, the syllables tasting like metal. Evan flipped his notebook to a second page and slid it halfway toward Marcus. We've also spoken to 2 former students from his last school. They used phrases like singled out, humiliated, and made us prove we belonged twice. One said he called her kiddo until the day she corrected him in front of the class, and then he called her a liar. She dropped the program. The gym's lights groaned themselves brighter by a fraction. Pushing against the dim, voices reassembled across the bleachers. The churn of a school trying to return to ordinary and failing. Marcus's gaze went to the side exit, where Reeves had vanished. He pictured the teacher's face under fluorescent light, the thin smile that had never stuck, the permanent marker letters under the caster. They didn't know, Jessica said softly. Or they chose to see what they wanted. The automotive program needed a hire after a retirement. He had years on his resume, decent test scores from past students, recommendations from people who didn't know or pretended not to know the rest. She lifted a shoulder. There's also a whisper of a settlement at the plant. Those come with non-disclosure agreements. Secrets like being paid not to say what happened. So it disappears, Angela said. Except it doesn't. It lands on kids. Evan nodded. We have 2 sources who will go on background, and 1 who'll go on record if someone else does first. Plus emails, sanitized, but clear between a district admin and Reeves. Tone is you'll be a good fit, and fresh start. He's had practice looking new every time. Marcus's mouth had gone dry. If you publish this, it'll blow up. It should, Angela said, but her hand found his elbow again. And it'll land on you too. The sentence opened a small chamber in Marcus's chest where fear lived. He saw next week like a set of flashcards, news vans, comments threaded with ugliness, kids who had decided already what they believed. He heard his father's voice, as steady as the satisfying click when a socket slips over a bolt. Some people hate to see you win. He also heard his mother's clear and quieter. Silence never protects the truth. He looked at Evan. If you publish, do you name me? We'll ask your consent to quote you, Evan said. You can decline. We can write this without putting you in the headlights. Headlights find you anyway, Angela said. She looked at Marcus. But you get to choose whether you stand still or keep moving while they're on you. Marcus stared down at his shoes for a long second. Untied laces could trip a man. So could not choosing. What if it makes things worse? He asked. The words heavier than his age. Angela didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice had the softness of a hand over a wound. Worse for you now, maybe, she said. Better for the kid next year who won't be called a show-off for being good. Better for the next mom who won't have to come to a meeting and hear place where potential should be. Daly approached then, the headlamp still skewed on his own hat like he'd forgotten it. He looked at the paper in Marcus's hand, didn't read, just waited. Did you put your initials on that tip? Marcus asked, nodding at the TD at the bottom of the page. Evan had given him. Daly smiled without humor. I told the press to check the key log for the breaker closet, he said. I didn't sign it. Someone else did. He paused. I filed a complaint on Reeves once. At a training conference. He ran a session where he put a black apprentice under the microscope for 40 minutes after the kid missed a torque spec by a hair. Called it standards. I called it a show. The complaint went nowhere. Standards often win when you're not looking at who's holding the ruler. He tipped his chin toward the paper. If that story's true, print it. Evan's phone buzzed. He glanced down, thumb skimming the screen, then passed it to Jessica. The two shared a look that said they were reading the same line at the same speed. We need to go, he told Marcus. The paper wants to move tonight. I'll text what we plan to run. You can choose to comment or not. Either way, this is bigger than your 5 seconds. As they left, Angela watched them go with an expression that said both thank you and God help us. Then she turned to Principal Dwyer, who had drifted close enough to have heard more than she'd intended. Dwyer's face had that administrative pallor, the look of someone sorting liability from humanity and not liking the work. Reeves didn't just lose a light today, Angela said. He lost the benefit of the doubt. Dwyer folded her arms, then unfolded them as if the motion were a tell. If there's a past we weren't informed of. There is, Angela said. You were informed. You just didn't ask the right people. She kept her voice level. Now ask. Dwyer nodded once. A small tilt that said something inside her had clicked. We will, she said. And in the meantime, Marcus, you are not to be alone with Mr. Reeves. I'll arrange coverage for the class. Good, Angela said. Start now. They left the gym as the lights finally returned to full strength, bleaching the corners until nothing remained for shadows to hold. Outside, the sky had begun to clear into the kind of blue that shows how cold the air really is. A wind cut down the side of the building and found every gap in their coats. Running at 10 p.m. Headline: District teachers pass complaints surface amid school demo sabotage. We have 2 former co-workers on record. 1 past student on background. Documents confirming mutual separation from Precision Automotive Training Center. After internal discrimination findings. Quote from District: We were unaware. Offer to Reeves for response at 6:12 p.m. No reply yet. Do you want a quote? Marcus read it twice. Angela read it once, and then looked at him like she wouldn't tell him what to say, because she trusted him to know. He typed slow so he wouldn't type soft. Quote me. I fixed the engine. That's all I wanted to do. Students deserve classrooms where success isn't treated as suspicion. He hit send before fear could edit it. Marcus's chest felt both lighter and more exposed. The internet did what it does. Shares stacked, comments split. Some said finally, some said witch hunt. Others said with that weary precision that comes from experience, we told you so, and you didn't want to hear it. Angela squeezed his shoulder. Whatever comes next, she said. We do it standing up. Standing up, he echoed. The doorbell rang at 10:19 p.m. Both polite and insistent. Angela's head snapped up. They weren't expecting anyone. She crossed to the door, checked the peephole, then opened it a cautious 4 inches. A courier stood on the mat in a branded jacket with a clipboard and the professional smile of a man who does not know what drama sits on the other side of doors. Delivery for Marcus Ellison, he said. Certified. Angela took the manila envelope, signed, and shut the door with a careful hand like she was putting a lid on a pot that might boil over. She set the envelope on the table. It looked heavier than paper. You want me to? She asked. Marcus nodded. He slid it with the back of a butter knife. Inside, a thick stack of printed pages and a cover letter from a law firm with a name that had too many partners listed to fit tastefully on one line. The subject in bold: Reeves v. Cole, Park and Ellison. Complaint for defamation. Marcus reread the last word until it separated into syllables that didn't mean anything. Defamation. The room seemed to tilt a degree. Angela's face changed in small increments as she scanned the first page. He named you, she said, voice flat with fury made precise. He named a high school student. The complaint language was both florid and cold. Reckless disregard for the truth. Malicious publication. Irreparable harm to professional reputation. Reeves sought damages. Injunctions. Apologies printed where apologies don't live. In the appendix, screenshots of the broadcast. A capture of Marcus's quote. A still frame of the gym under his headlamp like proof that light itself was defamatory. Marcus's stomach nodded. I just told the truth, he said, for himself more than for anyone else. And he's trying to make telling it cost you, Angela replied. She lifted her chin, the gesture small and unbreakable. We'll get a lawyer. We'll answer. His phone buzzed again. This time Evan, succinct and calm. We've been served. Our station stands by the story. We'll cover your counsel if needed. We won't fold. The floor under Marcus's feet steadied a hair. Still, the edges of the room felt sharp, as if the house had grown corners during the last hour. He looked at Angela, at the union card on the fridge, at the red-handled screwdriver, lying where he always left it. He thought of how racism could turn procedure into a weapon, and a boy into a defendant. Silence never protects the truth, Angela said again, not because he'd forgotten, but because they both needed to hear it out loud in a kitchen with too much paper on the table. Marcus set the complaint down, reached for his phone to call the number Evan had texted for counsel, and froze as a new email blinked in from no reply. Proton mail. Nice article. Court's just another engine. We already wired the next failure. The email still glowed on Marcus's phone when Angela snatched it from his hand to read for herself. Her expression didn't shift much. Her control was honed from years of confronting subtle insults and straight-faced lies, but her grip on the phone tightened until her knuckles thinned. She didn't speak about the threat. Not yet. Instead, she set the phone down on the table and looked her son dead in the eye. We don't flinch, she said. But the world outside their kitchen already had. By morning, a white news van idled across the street, its masked camera aimed squarely at the Ellison house. A man in a heavy parka loitered by the corner, with a camera slung at his chest. Two women stood just far enough away to pretend they weren't waiting for Marcus to step outside, their phones already recording. Even the neighbor's dog, usually indifferent, barked as if it had picked up the electricity in the air. Marcus stood at the living room window, the blinds tilted just enough for him to watch without being watched back. The weight in his chest wasn't fear. Exactly, it was something colder. He felt like an engine under the wrong hands, tuned to stall. Angela came in with 2 mugs of coffee, one of them just milk for him. They'll keep circling until they get what they want, she said. And what's that? He asked, though he already knew. A slip, she said. A crack in your voice. A face they can freeze frame and turn into their story. The lawsuit had become the story now. Headlines like student at center of school controversy, sued for defamation ricocheted through feeds. Some articles used his school photo, cropped tight like a mugshot. Others paired his name with Reeves's headshot from the district website, their faces stacked like opposing candidates. The comments underneath were a battlefield. Stand-up kid sat beside learn some respect. Truth teller, tangled with attention seeker. By mid-afternoon, Angela had found her counterpunch. She was on the phone in the kitchen, her voice low but urgent. David Marshall, she said into the receiver. Detroit, civil rights, trial tested. Yes, him. I don't care what he costs. If we don't win this, it's not just my son's name on the line. It's every kid who looks like him. David Marshall arrived 2 days later, in a charcoal overcoat, and the kind of calm that made rooms quieter. He was in his mid-50s, with silver streaking his hair, and a voice that carried without needing to push. He didn't waste their time with sympathy. He unpacked a legal pad, clicked a pen, and began with, "Here's what they'll try to do to you." He spoke in the same tone Marcus had heard his father use when explaining an engine failure. Not emotional, but exact. They'll question your credibility. They'll twist your words. They'll argue you made reckless statements that damaged a man's career. The fact that you're a minor doesn't stop them from dragging you through this, just from taking your house if they win. Marcus sat straighter. But I didn't lie. Doesn't matter, Marshall said. They'll argue you couldn't have known all the facts, so you acted with disregard for the truth. It's garbage, but it sounds legal when you wrap it in the right words. That's why I'm here to unwrap it. Angela's eyes didn't leave Marshall's face. And the email threat? We'll get it into discovery, Marshall said. But threats are smoke. They'll say it's unrelated. Our job is to prove where the fire started. The weeks leading to the hearing were an exercise in balance. School by day, legal prep by night. Marcus learned how to hold still while a reporter shouted questions through his front gate. How to turn down interviews without sounding guilty. How to answer Marshall's mock cross-examinations without stumbling into verbal traps. He also learned how many of his classmates had quietly taken sides, some nodding at him in the hall with new respect, others pivoting away like he carried a charge. One Friday afternoon, his locker door stuck halfway open. Someone had shoved a printout of the lawsuit inside. The word liar scrawled in black Sharpie across the first page. The ink bled through to the lines beneath. Marcus stared at it a moment, then folded it in half and dropped it into the bottom of his bag without breaking stride. Marshall called it conditioning. Reeves's side wanted him raw by the time he hit the stand. Don't give them that gift, the attorney said. Walk in like this is your shop, and they're paying you to do diagnostics. The courthouse was colder than it should have been. The morning of the hearing. The air smelled faintly of polish and paper, and the walls seemed to carry whispers that had been spoken there decades ago. Marcus wore his best shirt. The one Angela said made him look like he was meeting someone important for the first time, which in a way he was. Reeves was already seated at the plaintiff's table, his suit a shade darker than the one in his district portrait. His jaw was clean-shaven, his hair neatly combed, but his eyes held the same static hum Marcus had seen in the classroom, restless and assessing. Beside him, a man with the slick assurance of a high-fee litigator, arranged papers into neat stacks. The judge, a tall black woman with steel in her bearing, called the session to order. The first exchanges were procedural, motions to admit evidence, objections about phrasing, but the tension in the room was electric, the kind that makes even whispered sidebars feel amplified. Midway through the morning, Reeves's lawyer rose. Your Honor, he said, we believe this video will demonstrate reckless disregard for the truth. by the defendant, Mr. Ellison. Marcus felt Marshall's shoulder brush his, as both men turned to watch the screen that had been rolled in for exhibits. The lights dimmed slightly. The air seemed to hold its breath. The video began like the one that had gone viral. Marcus in the gym, the headlamp beam bright against the engine, but almost immediately something was off. His words had been cut, rearranged. In this version it looked as if he'd said, "The engine's fine. I set it up that way," followed by a smirk that Marcus knew had been spliced in from a different moment entirely. The splice of wire in the ignition box never appeared. Instead, the clip cut to Reeves shaking his head, his voice layered over the footage. "We can't have dishonesty in the classroom." Gasps broke from somewhere in the gallery. Angela's hand went rigid on the table. Marshall leaned forward, his pen frozen mid-note. "That's fake," Marcus said under his breath. But in the silence of the courtroom it sounded louder. The judge's gaze slid to the plaintiff's table, her brow arching. "Is this authenticated?" she asked. Reeves's lawyer smiled, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "It was provided by a concerned party, Your Honor. We'll call them as a witness." Angela's breath was steady, but Marcus could feel the heat in it. Marshall's voice was low but tight as he leaned toward his client. "They're trying to win this before you even speak." The doctored clip ended, freezing on Marcus's face mid-blink. The expression caught between thought and reaction, a perfect still for a false narrative. The image hung on the screen like a verdict that hadn't been read yet, but was already whispered in the corners of the room. The judge tapped her pen once against the bench, then looked directly at Marcus. "Mr. Ellison," she said, "you will have the opportunity to respond to this. But first I need to know who else had access to this original footage." The judge's question still hovered in the air. Who else had access to this original footage, when a voice rose from the back of the courtroom. "I did." Every head turned. Brianna Carter stood just inside the doorway, a winter coat still half-buttoned, cheeks flushed from the cold. She clutched her phone like it was a piece of evidence she'd been guarding for her life. Angela's eyes widened. Brianna walked down the aisle, each step deliberate, the sound of her boots sharp against the tile. "Your Honor," she said, stopping before the rail. "I recorded the whole thing from the bleachers that day. I didn't post it. I didn't send it to anyone. I just thought Marcus might need it." She glanced at him, and for a moment he saw the same steady gaze from that night in the gym, when she'd handed him her headlamp. Reeves's lawyer objected instantly. "Your Honor, we have no verification." The judge cut him off. "Then let's verify it." She nodded toward Marshall. "Mr. Marshall, can you produce this recording?" Marshall was already on his feet, his hand extended toward Brianna. "May I?" She unlocked the phone, pulled up the video, and handed it over like passing a torch. Marshall plugged it into the court's display system. The screen came to life. The grainy gym came into view, dim but honest. The sound of shuffling feet and murmurs uncut. The clip showed Marcus in the headlamp beam, his movements precise, the splice in the ignition box clearly visible. It showed his brief exchange with Daly, the careful adjustment, the clean roar of the engine coming to life. No boast, no smirk, no admission of sabotage. The engine spoke for itself. Then came the moment Reeves's doctored version had erased. Marcus turning off the switch, checking the gauges, and nodding with quiet satisfaction. Daly's voice, warm, even proud, filled the speakers. "Textbook work, Marcus. That's as clean as it gets." The courtroom was silent, except for the hum of the speakers. When the video ended, Marshall let the last frame hang there. A boy, not performing for a camera, but working with the kind of concentration that didn't need an audience. "Your Honor," Marshall said, his voice calm but carrying, "this is the unedited contemporaneous recording of the event in question. It was made from a public vantage point in the gymnasium. It contains timestamps that align exactly with the district's own security footage of the same time frame, footage we have requested in discovery, but have yet to receive." The judge's eyes slid to Reeves's lawyer. "Why haven't you produced the school's security footage?" The lawyer shifted. "We were informed it was unavailable due to
Technical faults?
the judge said, the edge in her tone slicing clean. "I've heard enough of those in this case to last me a lifetime." Angela allowed herself the smallest exhale, but her gaze never left Reeves. His face was taut, the kind of tightness that came from realizing the script had been taken out of your hands. Marshall pressed the advantage. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's case hinges on the claim that Marcus Ellison acted dishonestly in the gym that day. This recording proves the opposite. It also raises a troubling question. Who manipulated the original footage? And why was it presented to this court as evidence? Reeves's lawyer tried to recover. We acted in good faith. The judge's hand came down like a gavel before the gavel. Good faith doesn't splice tape. This is serious. If the source of that altered video is connected to your client, we may be discussing sanctions before this is over. The gallery buzzed, low but insistent. It was the sound of a story turning mid-sentence. Marcus didn't speak. He watched Reeves instead. The man's eyes darted, not to the judge, not to his lawyer, but to the door, the same way he'd done in the gym the day the engine roared. Marshall went further. Your Honor, in light of this new evidence, we believe the plaintiff's credibility is in question. We also have documents already submitted to the court, showing a pattern of similar incidents in Mr. Reeves's employment history, including prior discrimination complaints. Nana. Reeves's lawyer sputtered something about relevance, but the judge waved it aside. Pattern is relevant when intent is at issue. She flipped through the documents Marshall had handed over before the hearing began. 3 complaints over a span of 6 years. Different employers, similar allegations. Her gaze landed back on Reeves. Mr. Reeves, you are aware that this court can compel testimony from these prior complainants. Reeves's jaw clenched. I've done nothing wrong, he said, but it came out hollow. Brianna, still standing by the rail, met Marcus's eyes. The faintest smile tugged at her mouth, nothing gloating, just a shared recognition that sometimes truth survives long enough to be heard. The judge set the papers down, folded her hands, and looked over the room. Here's what I'm going to say, she began. This case is about more than a student fixing an engine, or a teacher's pride. I'm seeing evidence of targeted behavior that, if proven, may cross into civil rights violations. That is not a small matter. Depending on what discovery reveals, this may not stay in small claims or even standard civil court. Angela's brows lifted. Civil rights, she repeated under her breath, as if tasting the words. Marshall leaned toward Marcus. That means we're not just defending you anymore, he said quietly. We might be turning this around. Across the aisle, Reeves shifted in his seat, like the floor had tilted. His lawyer whispered urgently, but he didn't answer. The judge's gaze landed on Marcus, steady but not unkind. Mr. Ellison, the truth has a way of surviving, even when people try to bury it. I suspect this case is far from over, but for today this court will recess while I consider the implications of this new evidence. The gavel fell with a sharp crack. As the room stirred, Marcus felt a strange mixture of relief and something heavier. This wasn't the end. It was the engine turning over before the real test drive. Angela stood, placing a hand on his shoulder. You see, she said quietly, 5 seconds or 5 weeks. It's still your work that speaks the loudest. Marshall gathered his files with the satisfaction of a mechanic who'd found the hidden fault in the system. Next step, he said. We dig into that civil rights angle. But as Marcus moved toward the door with his mother and attorney, a folded note slipped into his palm. He looked down at the tight, slanted handwriting. You won the round, not the race. No signature, just a small grease smudge in the corner like it had been written in a shop. Outside the courthouse, a different camera crew waited. Not the local news, but a national network microphone raised. The reporter already calling out, Marcus, how does it feel knowing the FBI might get involved? The national reporter's question, how does it feel knowing the FBI might get involved, hung in the winter air like a flare. Marcus blinked at the microphone as cameras clustered closer, the courthouse steps tilting into a stage he hadn't asked for. He could feel Angela's presence at his side, steady as a hand on a flywheel. It feels overdue, he said, voice even. And it feels like this isn't just about me. The clip traveled faster than he could walk to the curb. By nightfall, the line had been looped over footage of the engine roaring under a headlamp, spliced with a graphic, students versus system. It would have been flattering if it weren't exhausting. Momentum didn't ask permission. It arrived with group chats renamed, profile pictures swapped for a wrench icon, and a senior named Lila, who printed stickers that read standards nay sabotage. In the first week, 50 students wore them. By the second you could see them on lunch trays, laptop lids, and trumpet cases. A freshman marched into the office to file a complaint about the vibe. He didn't have the language. He had a sticker. They formed a coalition in the library after school. The quiet only breaking for the thrum of a printer churning out flyers. Carter drafted a statement. Brianna argued commas. A drummer from Pep Band designed a poster so clean, it looked like a billboard. Don't grade us on your bias. They named themselves Fix the System. a joke and a thesis at once. Marcus tried to sit in the back, but the room kept rotating him to the front. "We need you at the mic," Lilo insisted, sliding him the agenda. "It's your face they're trying to distort. Use it." He sighed. "I fix engines, not rooms." "Today the room is the engine," she said. The line was too neat to fight. The first rally gathered on the football field under a thin sun, the bleachers a patchwork of coats and doubt. Someone set up a portable speaker that sounded like a tin can full of bees. The signs were handmade and furious. "Teach us, don't trick us. Dignity is a standard. I'm not your example. I'm your student." Marcus stepped up, because there was no one else arranged to. His breath fogged and dissipated before he spoke. "I'm not a leader," he began, immediately realizing leaders always say that. "I'm here because an adult told me failure was my lesson, and when I didn't fail, he called it a trick. If you grew up hearing you don't belong, you know that move. You know how it tries to make you small. We can't build anything on small." The crowd answered with a sound that wasn't quite applause, more like agreement, releasing pressure. He felt it wash back over him, not a wave but a current. "We deserve classrooms where we aren't being tested for who we are," he said. "We deserve labs that teach us how to fix what's broken instead of making us feel like the broken thing." It wasn't poetry. It didn't need to be. Phones lifted, recorded, posted. The words lived longer than the breath that formed them. The petitions came next. Organized, framed, relentless. Independent review of complaints. One demanded. Mandatory bias training for CTE instructors, another said. A student ombuds's office. A third insisted. When the district tried to meet them with a listening session, Fix the System arrived with a spreadsheet of stories. Kids who had been told to tone it down, to wait their turn, to calm down when they asked for the same treatment everyone else already had. The stories were small enough alone to be dismissed. Together they made a pattern no one could ignore without admitting indifference. Unexpected allies surfaced. A retired shop teacher from another school wrote an op-ed in the Sunday paper. "The best students will outpace you. Your job is to run alongside." A union rep stood up at a board meeting and called the doctored video an offense to labor and to learning. Even a few teachers from Jefferson, anonymous, nervous, emailed Evan and Jessica. "We've seen this before. We were afraid to say it." The district, sensing which way the wind was blowing, shifted from defensive to contrite. They announced an external review, led by a law firm, whose letterhead made Angela arch an eyebrow. They promised listening circles and restorative practices, words that made some kids roll their eyes and others show up anyway. Reeves, for 3 long days, went silent. Then a statement arrived in inboxes and news feeds at once. "My commitment to safety and standards has been misunderstood, and the current media environment makes it impossible to teach effectively. Effective immediately, I am resigning." No apology, no admission. A resignation framed as sacrifice. Silence swept the hallway like a gust. Someone exhaled a curse. Carter dropped his backpack and whispered. He ran. Angela read the statement on her phone and pressed her lips together into a line that said, "Don't mistake an exit for a reckoning." If the resignation was supposed to end the story refused to comply. Old complaints surfaced now that people felt safer. A mother in a neighboring district wrote publicly about a son who had quit auto tech after being singled out for attitude. When he asked why a procedure had 3 extra steps for him, an alum posted a thread about being told she made the boys uncomfortable by being too good at torque specs. The dots connected themselves. You only had to. National outlets picked it up. One morning at school, a satellite truck appeared next to the band room, a boom mic rising like a weird new tree. A network anchor interviewed Marcus in the library next to the 3D printer, and a display of banned books. The anchor had the polished empathy of a person who could ask, "How do you feel?" and mean it in the moment, even if the tapes would be labeled by date, not by care. "How do you carry this?" she asked. Marcus had learned to answer without letting the frame do the work. "With other people," he said. "If you try to carry it alone, it crushes you and then blames you for being crushed." The interview ended with a lead-in to their national feed. A Detroit teen's 5 seconds are turning into a movement. He went to 5th period late and turned a socket while his classmates pretended not to glance. The twist arrived the next week from a place that had always been near and somehow never seen. The teacher's lounge. Daly, who had been assigned to shadow the program until a new instructor was found, invited Marcus to speak to CTE leads from across the district. He stood in front of men and women who smelled faintly of machine oil and coffee, their faces weathered by decades of early mornings. I'm not here to drag anyone, he said. I'm here because I don't want the next kid to have to argue with a grown man just to be allowed to be good. A woman with grease under her nails nodded, eyes wet. We needed to hear it from you, she said. We pretend we don't see what we see. Shane sat in the room for a beat, then made room for resolve. Fix the system matured. They moved from rallies to policy. Lila and Brianna met with board members and came armed with model language from other districts. They pushed for a student skill review protocol, objective checklists that left less room for a teacher's mood to be the syllabus. They proposed a complaint process that didn't rely on students walking straight into the office of the person they feared. Marcus learned a new rhythm. School, coalition, shop. He still went home to the garage and let the lamp throw its oval of quiet onto whatever metal he was coaxing back to life. There, he could feel his father close the low murmur of advice that never once had contained the word place. The civil rights inquiry widened. Jessica published a piece showing that the doctored video had been exported on a district computer one floor above the gym. The user ID had been wiped, but the timestamp matched a custodian's report of a man in a hurry ducking into the office. The board placed 2 administrators on leave, pending review, and the internet, fickle and fierce, found something else to devour for 3 days before circling back to the kids who still had to take algebra at 8:15 a.m. One night after a town hall, Marcus and Angela walked home under a sky so clear you could hear it. Their breath came white. Angela's phone pinged. Then his. A new statement from the district. We will partner with students to rebuild trust. The sentence read like a promise and a press release. Angela shrugged. We'll make them mean it, she said. The next day, the auditorium filled for a student-led forum. A freshman with a quaver in her voice told the room she loved engines because they did not interrupt her. A senior described how he'd stopped raising his hand because the answer always sounded different in his mouth. Marcus took note. Everyone took notes. It felt like inventory, counting what had been missing so you could order what you needed. Unexpectedly, the alumni chapter of a national engineering fraternity reached out. One of their members, class of '92, a machinist with a soft laugh, stood up at a rally and said, "We've been waiting for you." He didn't mean Marcus alone. He meant the kids who would come after. Keep talking, Daly said to Marcus in the hallway, after the assembly. Not because cameras want you to, because boys who look like you need to hear it in your voice. Boys who don't look like me need to hear it in my voice too, Marcus answered. Daly smiled. That, especially. Reeves's lawsuit limped along, a shadowboxing match against the weight of the tape that didn't break. Marshall filed a counterclaim for malicious prosecution and kept his sentences razor sharp. The judge's docket filled with quieter cases. Theirs waited its turn with a patience Marcus did not know he had, and borrowed anyway. And then the mail came. Marcus found the envelope on the kitchen table, plain and heavy, the return address embossed, not printed. Harrington Institute of Engineering, admissions. He stared at the crest like it might blink. His fingers went oddly cold. Angela came in with grocery bags, and stopped when she saw his face. What? She asked, and then saw, oh. He slid a thumb under the flap, careful like it might be a trick. The paper inside was crisp enough to make a sound. Dear Mr. Ellison. It began, and his heart stuttered like an engine, between cylinders. We have followed your recent work with interest, not the headlines, but the precision. It is our honor to offer you admission to the Harrington Summer Engineering Scholars Program, full tuition covered, with a pathway scholarship contingent upon completion. We believe you will not only thrive here, you will raise our standard. He read the paragraph twice, then set the page down and laughed once in disbelief. A short, stunned sound that broke into something bigger in his chest. Angela picked up the letter and read it aloud like a benediction. Tears she didn't bother hiding blurring the last line. On the table next to the letter, his phone buzzed. A new email. Subject, congratulations. Sender, no reply, at harrington.edu. And then, below it, a second notification landed with the subtle cruelty of timing. No reply, at Proton Mail. Scholarships are engines too. We know how to stall them. Marcus looked from the offer letter to the thread on his screen. The two futures sitting inches apart, as the house seemed to tilt. Choice and danger sliding toward each other like tools on a moving bench. The drive to Harrington Institute cut through 2 hours of winter countryside, the horizon a clean white seam under a steel sky. Marcus rode shotgun, Angela at the wheel, both of them quiet in the way people get when they know they're heading toward something that might change their lives. The offer letter lay folded in his jacket pocket, edges already softened from being read too many times. The campus appeared like a city pulled from a blueprint. Sleek glass facades, reflecting the muted sun, wide walkways framed by evergreens, buildings whose walls seemed to hum with the electricity of ideas. The sign at the main entrance bore the crest from the letter, etched into brushed steel, Harrington Institute of Engineering. Angela parked in the visitor lot. Your father would have hated the parking meters, she said, smiling. But he would have loved this place. They met Dr. Eleanor Klein in the admissions lobby. A tall woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled into a braid, and safety goggles perched on her head, like she'd just stepped out of a lab. She shook Marcus's hand firmly. We've been excited to meet you in person, she said. I've read your file twice. Not the part about the news stories, the part about your repair logs. Marcus felt a warmth he didn't expect. I didn't think anyone would care about those. Anyone worth learning from does, Klein replied. She led them through a glass corridor, into a lab the size of a basketball court. Rows of workbenches gleamed under bright LEDs, each station equipped with a full set of calibrated tools. Across the far wall, a line of engines sat on mounts like sculpture. Inline 4s, V6s, even a stripped-down turbine. Students in lab coats worked in pairs, their conversations a low mix of torque numbers and test readings. This is our applied mechanics lab, Klein said. Here, mistakes aren't failures, they're data. Marcus trailed a few steps behind, his eyes sweeping over the organized chaos. An oscilloscope hooked to a prototype motor, a robotic arm assembling a gearbox, a 3D printer humming as it built a housing piece layer by layer. It was a cathedral of function, every tool in its place, every movement purposeful. They toured the materials lab next, where carbon fiber panels hung like art, and the fluids lab, where transparent engines ran on stands, so students could watch combustion in slow motion. Klein pointed out each space with the pride of someone who had built it herself. At lunch in the faculty lounge, Marcus met two potential mentors. Dr. Raj Patel, an aerodynamics expert, told him, "We're not here to see if you fit in, we're here to see how far you can go." Simone Alvarez, a design engineer with a laugh that filled the room, added, "And if anyone ever tells you you don't belong, send them to me." The words landed differently than the speeches back home. Here they weren't defenses against doubt. They were invitations. Later, Klein walked them to a quieter building, the oldest on campus. She unlocked a door at the end of a narrow hall and ushered Marcus inside. The room smelled faintly of oil and wood. Against one wall stood a workbench scarred with decades of use, and above it hung a black and white photograph. A young man in coveralls bent over an engine, his face lit by concentration. "This was our first machine shop," Klein said. "The man in that photo, William J. Harrington, started here with nothing but curiosity and a set of borrowed tools. His professors saw him work and said, 'We'll give you the rest.' That's the kind of story we want to write again." Marcus ran his fingers over the bench's grooves. It reminded him of the one in his garage, the one his father had built from scrap wood and bolted to the floor so it would never shift. In that moment, he could almost hear his father's voice, low and certain. "You fix one thing at a time, that's how you build anything worth keeping." For the first time in months, the tight coil of anger in his chest loosened. The air here felt different, lighter, not because the weight was gone, but because it was finally being carried with help. Angela noticed it. "You're breathing easier," she said softly. "Feels like I'm in the right shop," he replied. The tour ended back in the admissions building, where Klein handed Marcus a folder thick with program outlines, housing options, and scholarship details. "We'll see you this summer," she said. "And remember, the work you've already done, that was the hard part. This is where we sharpen it." Marcus stepped outside into the thin afternoon sun. He pulled out his phone to take one last picture of the crest on the entrance sign. Angela was halfway to the car when his screen lit with an incoming call. "Harrington Institute Financial Aid Office." He answered. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was polite, but formal. "Mr. Ellison, this is Caroline from Financial Aid. I'm calling to inform you that there's been a development regarding your scholarship award." Marcus stopped walking. "What kind of development?" "There's been a request for review," she said. "We've been asked to re-verify certain aspects of your eligibility. Until that process is complete, your scholarship status will be listed as pending." The folder in his hands suddenly felt heavier. "Who requested the review?" "I'm not at liberty to disclose that," she replied. "But I can tell you the review was initiated from an external communication. We'll be in touch once it's resolved. The call ended before he could speak again. Angela turned when she saw his face. What happened? Marcus looked past her at the gleaming buildings, the labs that had felt like promise just minutes ago. They're rethinking the scholarship, he said, the words tasting like metal. From somewhere behind them, a light breeze rattled the flag outside the admissions office. For the first time all day, the campus felt less like a city of possibility and more like a place someone could lock you out of. His phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number. Told you. Engines stall when you choke the fuel. The email from the Harrington Scholarship Review Board arrived on a Wednesday morning. Its subject line as sterile as the fluorescent lights in Marcus's chemistry class. Status update. Pending award. He opened it on his phone between bells, scanning past the formal greeting to the sentence that mattered. We have received new complaints concerning your recent conduct and are obligated to reassess your eligibility. There was no detail, just the same polite, clipped language institutions use when pretending the issue is procedural, not personal. But Marcus knew the scent of sabotage. Angela's reaction was sharper. New complaints? She said, holding the phone like it was something rotten. From who? That man's already out of the picture. Not out enough, Marcus replied. He'd learned by now that people like Reeves didn't need proximity to leave fingerprints. 2 days later, Harrington called with their proposition. If Marcus wanted the scholarship secured, he would participate in a live demonstration during the Institute's annual donor showcase, a high-profile event, streamed online, and attended by alumni with checkbooks large enough to alter the school's future. The terms were simple and brutal. The machine he'd be given would be complex, possibly non-functional, and he'd have no prior warning of what it was. He'd be allowed exactly one attempt to repair it. No warm-up, no second chances. Angela bristled. They're turning you into a performance. Maybe, Marcus said. But if that's the shop they want to work in, I'll bring my own tools. The day of the showcase. The main engineering hall had been transformed into a kind of industrial theater. Rows of donors in tailored suits and evening dresses filled the seats, their conversations a low blend of curiosity and calculation. Stage lights bounced off polished steel, and at center stage sat a machine under a heavy canvas sheet. Dr. Klein met Marcus backstage. This isn't fair, she admitted, but if you do this, they'll have no room left for doubt. I'm not here for doubt, Marcus said. I'm here for proof. The MC, a man with the polished cadence of a fundraiser, introduced Marcus as a young innovator from Detroit and explained the challenge. Then, with theatrical flair, he pulled away the canvas. Beneath it sat a precision-cut gear assembly mounted to a motor part of a high-speed wind tunnel testing rig. The entire drive system was exposed, its belt slack, one of its coupling bolts missing. Marcus stepped forward, the room's murmur dropping to near silence. He took a slow lap around the rig, eyes scanning, fingers brushing each joint. His father's voice surfaced in memory. The problem is never what they tell you it is. The MC cleared his throat. Whenever you are ready, Mr. Ellison. Marcus set his tool roll on the table. His movements were calm, almost casual, loosening a panel here, adjusting a tensioner there. He spotted it, a misaligned idler pulley that had thrown the belt. Sliding the belt clear, he reseated the pulley, tightened it, and looped the belt back in place. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a single bolt he'd carried since the gym showdown, a perfect match for the missing coupling. He tightened it with 2 smooth turns.
Time, someone called.
5 seconds, said Klein from the wings, and the number rippled through the crowd like a fuse catching. Marcus flicked the switch. The motor came alive instantly, the assembly humming with precision, the belt running clean and straight. The pitch of the machine filled the hall, a sound both mechanical and triumphant. For a moment there was only the hum and the collective breath of the room. Then applause broke, sharp and unrestrained. Donors rose to their feet. Some whistled. Others clapped with the exact kind of fervor that could write a check without blinking. Klein stepped forward, shaking his hand before turning to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the question of eligibility has been answered. Angela was already moving through the crowd, her smile fierce and proud. You didn't just fix it, she said. When she reached him, you shut the door they kept trying to leave open. Later that afternoon, Caroline from financial aid called again, her tone warmer this time. Mr. Ellison, your scholarship has been confirmed in full. We look forward to welcoming you this summer. Marcus thanked her, but inside he knew the real win wasn't the award. It was that the smear had failed. That night, in the quiet of his garage, Marcus set the borrowed coupling bolt on the workbench. Beside it sat his father's old wrench, the handle worn smooth. He thought of the chain of moments that had led here. A challenge in a classroom meant to humiliate him. A 5-second fix that had turned into a battle. And the people, friends, mentors, his mother who'd kept the engine running when someone tried to starve it of fuel. He spoke aloud, not to anyone in the room but to the memory of his father. Sometimes, 5 seconds is all it takes to break chains generations long. In the days that followed, articles appeared with headlines like "Detroit Teen Outpaces the Odds," and "From Garage to Greatness," the Marcus Ellison story. Interviews were requested. Invitations to speak at youth STEM conferences rolled in. The final rally of the school year filled the gym again, this time with banners hung high and no one in the bleachers waiting for him to fail. Marcus stood at center court, not as a defendant or a challenger, but as Afterward, as the crowd spilled outside, a young reporter with a notepad caught up to him. She was breathless from weaving through the bodies, her pen poised. "What's next for you, Marcus?" she asked, voice eager. Marcus looked at her for a moment, then let a slow smile form. Not the kind that gave away answers, but the kind that said he was still deciding which ones to build. The cameras caught the smile, but not the thoughts behind it. Those, Marcus knew, were his to keep, until it was time for the next 5 seconds. If you've ever seen someone's light dimmed just because of who they are, you know this fight isn't over. Every voice matters. Every stand counts.